Our next speaker is someone that Jim would have been elated to hear speaking. If he's anywhere watching this from above or what have you, he'll be very happy to see this next speaker. This speaker was one of the jurors at the Jim Traficant's trial. And Jim always spoke about how he got railroaded, and when he came out, he spoke about several witnesses and jurors that had come forward saying that the jury had been tampered with, that they had false witnesses, and that the jurors themselves had been coerced. Well, the next speaker, Leo Glazer, was one of the jurors, and he has come forward, and he deserves a lot of credit for the courage to come forward and speak about such a high-profile trial. He's probably the only American that has ever come out to do that in such a big trial. And he will tell you his story of how, on a day-to-day basis, of how progressively, not only was the jury set up from the beginning to convict Jim, but if there was any chance of justice being done, circumstances were twisted in eliminating potential jurors and tampering with the secret notes that the jurors themselves made. So he can explain the whole situation much better. Without further ado, I want to introduce Leo Glazer.
Thanks, Pete. This is my inaugural speech in front of an audience. I haven't done this probably since high school. I talked to an audience and stuff. I was, as people were saying, I was the juror on the Traficant trial, juror number 8. And shortly, or almost immediately after the verdict was rendered, there were many things that happened during the trial, and especially in the deliberation room, that I didn't think was ethical, legal, whatever else adjectives you want to add to it. Something wasn't right in the whole trial, and I tried to get a hold of all of the major players in the trial, like the judge and the prosecutor, the lead U.S. attorney in it, and I didn't want to go public, or I didn't want to go to the media or anything like that, because I didn't want to screw up things for Jim more than I had already done. But a long story short, I was really coerced into, and probably strong-armed about the whole thing, and especially the verdict. Some of the things that went on in there, I had written out an affidavit, which was all legal and notarized and everything like that, of what actually happened in the whole course of events. But I didn't make that public, or I didn't let that out until after Jim came out. And I never pursued before the sentencing or while he was in prison, because, like I say, I didn't want to screw it up even more than what I actually did. So there were a couple of instances where I was able to get on some national talk shows, Hannity and Combs. It was Hannity and Combs at that time that they had me on. And Hannity, when I started saying that he really got railroaded and stuff, Hannity jumped all over me saying that you don't know what you're talking about and stuff. I was there, I was in the jury room. I'll swear up and down on a stack of Bibles that everything that's in that affidavit is true. Combs was very nice in that he was like defending me and stuff. And it was, I guess, just a coincidence, but a couple of months later, it just became Hannity. Combs was gone. I don't know. He's on the radio or something like that.
Yeah.
I doubt that I had anything to do with that. But anyway, I was also on Greta Van Susteren, but only about 2 minutes, because they had to cut away to California. There was some kind of little girl. I don't know if she was just killed or if they just found her or something like that. But they had to cut away from that, so I was only on for 2 minutes, and then they were supposed to have me on later, but they never got around to it. But anyway, the affidavit, some of the things in there, it's online. You want to Google it, Leo Glazer affidavit, I guess. Last name spelled Glaser. It's an 8-page long affidavit, and like I say, give me a stack of Bibles, I'll swear that everything in there is the truth. Now, some of the highlights in there, that was the first time I've ever been on a jury. I've never even been on county or city or any kind of jury. This is a federal jury that I was on. My God, I was really impressed with the whole, the courtroom and the 20-foot high ceilings with the frescoes all over the place, and it was very impressive and stuff. So one of the first things that was like unusual to me was that each juror received a steno book, those spiral steno books, and the judge's instructions were to take notes as the trial proceeds. And she assured me that nobody was going to look at these, and every day they would be collected, and then they would be stored in the judge's chambers, and the next day we would get them all back. They had our number on there, juror 1 through 12. So like I say, I was number 8 on the thing. And they also gave you a rubber band to put around it to make sure that nobody can open it. Security. So as the trial proceeded, I was taking notes on, like, I don't believe what this guy is saying, How could he say this when it's already out this, this guy doesn't seem credible to me. I would write that down. After about the 3rd or 4th day, I thought, how can I be sure that nobody looks at this?
Yeah.
That the judge doesn't, or that the prosecutor, the state, whatever, has got a key to the judge's chamber, or maybe she's even in on it or something.
Yeah.
So what I did was the spiral wire that's on the top of the steno book, I took my pen and I pushed it in to like the 3rd spiral, so it was still sticking out.
Yeah.
So you got plenty of room to press it all the way in. And then the rubber band that's around it, I made sure that it wasn't twisted or that it was flat. So the next day when I got it back, the pen is pushed all the way in, and the rubber band is all twisted up. Yeah, it's still on there. So I'm thinking,
Just by having
well,
myself.
it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
I tried it again, but when it happened the second time, I got suspicious. that somebody's looking at that. I don't know, maybe the cleaning lady or something.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure, So from then on, I was just writing stupid things in there, Or I really like this lady witness, she's a hottie or something, and just stupid. Don't write anything on it. So that's just one instance. But the main issues were in the during deliberation. As soon as we got into the deliberation room, the lady, we had to choose a foreman or a form woman. Uh, so, well, I don't want to, nobody wanted to be it. So this lady volunteered because she said that she was on a federal trial before, and she knows the procedures as to how you vote, whether you're guilty or not guilty and stuff. So, well, naturally, yeah, go ahead. The job's yours. She happened to be in seat number 1 anyway. So, okay, so she's a foreman. Okay, so she said, well, the first thing we got to do is you pass around like an index card or whatever. And write on there whether you think he's guilty or not guilty on the first count. So I thought, shouldn't we at least discuss it?
Yeah.
So she says, no, she says that it'll make things a lot easier if we all agree on the first round.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's go to count 2 and stuff, okay? So everybody wrote down, on count number 1, and she read what the count was and stuff. Passed it around. It came back to her. 11 guilty, 1 not guilty.
Oh, God.
What do you mean not guilty? Does anybody want to volunteer who did that? So I said, yeah, I think we should at least discuss it. Why do you think that he's guilty? And I'll tell you why I think he's not guilty and stuff. So it came down to, we argued for probably a couple of hours. I don't even remember what the first count was and stuff, but I know we argued for a while. And we did it 2 or 3 times, and she said, on the third time, well, it looks like we're not getting anywhere with this one. Let's go to number 2, see if we can compromise on that. Okay, so we went to number 2, and same thing again. It was 11 to 1 to guilty and stuff. Right away went on to 3rd. Well, it went on like that. So I think the first day of deliberation, we started on a Monday. The first day, we didn't get past the 3rd count because there was always disagreements. Once in a while, a second juror would come in and say not guilty. And why not? And, so anyway, when we got to about Wednesday, Thursday, it was really, it really got intense and stuff. So I forget I forget what count it was on and stuff. And what I had said was that I thought he was not guilty because I felt that by this time that the prosecution is capable of manufacturing evidence, coming up with all kinds of, even though there weren't any phone taps or wiretaps, but there were photographs, and to me, photographs can be doctored up to and stuff. And not that it was a smoking gun or anything like that. It's just that they like overdid it. One of the ones I remember seeing is a photograph that they had, and it was a 5x7 or something like that they passed around with all of the jurors of Traficant's farm. And it was an aerial view of the whole complex, and it looked like, I don't know if some of you remember the old TV series Dynasty. It looked like Dynasty was filmed on Traficant's farm because of the number of barns and everything looked, from the air, everything looks great. It wasn't until after the trial and after he was sentenced and stuff that I really went down there, and I got pictures of the actual thing. There's one house that's right out on the road and stuff. The screen door was hanging there on one of the hinges came loose and stuff, and you could have used a paint job on it. And looking back at some of the barns and sheds and stuff that they were sort of leaning and stuff, but nowhere near of what the aerial view of the farm looked like. And like when we got to getting back to the jury deliberation, one of the things, when I said that the government is capable of manufacturing evidence, I said something like that they can come up with all kinds of documentation, photographs, and they'll convince you by mathematics and everything else that the earth is flat, and if you take a boat far enough out there, you'll fall off the edge of the earth. And that's when one of the jurors went nuts on me. I mean, she exploded, and she says, "You're crazy," and used some other superlatives. and she ended up by saying, I mean, she was screaming at the top of her lungs, and she ended up by saying that if you think I'm staying here past Friday, you're nuts.
Yeah.
You know. So okay. Then one of the U.S. Marshals came in. Now the jury room, there's a space of maybe about 10 feet where you go through the door, then you go through another door, and that's when you're in the courtroom. So there's it's supposed to be soundproofing the jury room. But the marshal came in when she went ballistic on me. He comes in and he opens up the door and he says, "You got to keep it down. You got to keep it down. There's people sitting in the courtroom that can hear you out there." Like I say, she was screaming. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so that was like the last straws that where I started thinking that, boy, this lady is predisposed already.
Very good.
You know, she's there to crack the whip on anybody that did it. So anyway, for anybody who was wanting to, okay, so quiet down, settle down. Let's go around one more time, okay? But this time it came down 10 guilty and 2 not guilty. So again, she went nuts, and she says, "That's it." She says, "I'm not partaking in any of this. You people are crazy. You 2 people are crazy. See what you've done? You've convinced somebody else that he's not guilty and stuff." She went storming off to the other side of the jury room, and she was looking out the window, and she was, again, ticked off. So the jury foreman says, "Well, we can't continue on if one of them isn't participating in this thing." So she went over there, and another lady went over there, tried to comfort her and stuff like that. And, you know, they finally talked her into coming back and let's be sensible about this and stuff. Then another juror came up. Again, I don't remember what the exact count was and stuff like that. And because I already said that he's not guilty and stuff like that, he said that he was on a jury also, on a federal jury, and that because of me, it's just a gut feeling or my reasoning for voting not guilty. My reasoning doesn't make sense, and you're going to hang the jury. He said, and if you're going to hang this jury, the government spend a lot of money on this on this thing, and you're the one that hung the jury. He says you're going to be spending your time in the jail cell next to trafficking because you're
just as guilty.
you're just as guilty as trafficking for hanging up, and you must have some connection with them, and you're getting paid off and blah blah. I have had issues, different issues before the trafficking trial with my local government and school district. There's a real long story over there. And it dawned on me at that time that if I want a resolution to my issues, my personal issues with my local government and the school district, that I would have to go through the same U.S. Attorney's Office. Because these are federal crimes against I have two disabled kids. They're both deaf. It's a real long story about why the school district wouldn't educate my kids. So I would have to go through the U.S. Attorney's Office because these are federal violations, civil rights violations. So at that time, when the guy tells me that if if I don't vote guilty with trafficking, I'm gonna spend my time in the jail next to him. Don't think it's, you know, I'm just one guy, these people aren't. You're not gonna convince them, and especially the ones that are predisposed already. Well, two of them. And so finally, it happened to be Friday and stuff like that. Okay, you know, guilty. I was the 12th guy. And like I say, if you can, get a hold of the, on the internet, Google that affidavit that I penned and stuff, and there's probably a lot of things that I said in there that I don't have time to go into that, go into details and stuff. So the time from the time we found him guilty until sentencing date, I want to say there was about 2 months different between that. So I wanted to go down for his sentencing, and like I say, I haven't been on the jury before, so I didn't know what the procedures were. I was hoping that it was like at a wedding, to where, is there anybody out there? Hold your peace or whatever. I was hoping that they would ask me, does anybody think that he was railroaded or something like that? Well, it never happened. I went down there early, and I was sitting, there was only one bench in the hallway. Everybody was in the hallway, and people were lined up because there's only room for so many people in there. A lot of media, news media was also there for the sentencing part of the thing. So when I got there, like I said, the line was real long. So I saw one bench right on opposite of where the elevator is at the courthouse. So I figured I'd sit down there and wait until I'll be the last one to go in. I don't care if I got to stand or not. So as I was sitting there, about 10 minutes before they were going to open up the door for the trial, for the sentencing, one of the U.S. Marshals, and we were on a first name basis. There was about 5 U.S. Marshals that accommodated all of us. You know, during lunch, they would take us around to one of the restaurants nearby and keep an eye on and make sure that we don't talk to anybody and stuff. And same thing in the morning. We were, everybody parked in a municipal parking lot, and they would transport us with a van up to the courthouse and stuff. So they were like babysitting us all of the time. So at sentencing, when I sat down over there, there's all those, one of them noticed me sitting over there, and he said, he came over, said hi, and stuff. First name basis too. You know, how you doing? Okay. So he says, what are you doing down here? You know, you were the juror and I think. I said, I want to see how sentencing is going to go. Oh, okay. He says, well, when we open up the doors, he says, I'll call you up and you can get in the front of the line, you know, like the old Bob Euchre. Oh, I'm in the front row, you know. So, okay, so I sat down, and another 5 minutes passed. All of a sudden, the elevator door opens up, and here comes Jim Traficant with his, I think his wife might have been with him. There were a couple other people with him. Boom, he takes a straight shot right at me, shakes my hand, and he says, come on over here. Puts his arm around me. That was the first time I've ever talked face-to-face with Jim. It was all in the jury room. And he says, come on over here. Got to talk to you, but this is private, okay? Yeah, no problem here. So all of the people that were standing, especially the news media and stuff like that, all of them, who's that? Talking to Jim. And so after we got done talking with him, he goes in, and once he was in there, the U.S. Marshals gestured for me to go in and sat down on one side. And again, this was like at a wedding when everybody's in church. You know, this side is the bride and this side's the groom. And in the courtroom, it was, this side was the prosecution, and these were the people that were on Jim's side, the defense side, or whatever, because most of his relatives and stuff was over there. So they put me, they put me in on Jim's side, and then I was surprised because I didn't see her outside. This one juror that I felt was predisposed, she was led into where she came from, I have no idea because she wasn't outside. They brought her in, put her on the prosecution side. So there's just the aisle in between us, and we both like, wow, what are you doing here? Okay, so we said hi and stuff like that. So, I don't know, coincidence? I don't know. Because by this time, I think she would have known, because from the media and from what I've been saying about predisposed or something like that, maybe she was asked to show up and maybe she was supposed to talk to me, or I don't know what the exact thing is, but we were the only two jurors that were in there. And so when the sentencing came, okay, they sentenced him, I think it was 7.5 years or whatever. And they hauled him away right away. They slapped the cuffs on him, took him away. No chance of appeal being out while there's appeals or whatever. No, he was gone. So one of the other interesting things during the trial was this other juror. Guy's name is Scott Grody. I believe it's Grodi. He was on the jury for, I'd say, 3/4 of the way through. And one day he was just dismissed, didn't show up, or and one of the alternates had to take his place. Found out after the trial what had happened. Apparently his aunt passed away in a traffic accident, and from a very young age, I don't know where his parents were, but for some reason his aunt is the one that raised him. And when she was involved in a traffic accident and she died, he was concerned that the trial wasn't going to be finished while she had her funeral. So he wanted like a day off, maybe stop the trial for a day so he can go to his aunt's funeral. But apparently the judge decided against that it was better that he just be dismissed after 3/4 of the time. So he was dismissed, and one of the alternates took his place. It wasn't until after the trial I found out he also wrote out an affidavit, and on his affidavit he was saying that he wanted to be on the Traficant trial in no uncertain terms. He didn't want to be dismissed. He could have went to his aunt's grave after the trial and stuff like that. But he mentioned that he already determined that Traficant was not guilty. The thing was that he was a smoker. I'm not a smoker. And during the breaks, and while we were in the room in between and lunchtime and stuff, the U.S. Marshals would take the 5 or 6 smokers, take them downstairs into the basement where they could have a smoke break. And during that time, even though the marshals were around and stuff, people were talking about the trial and about who's next, who's the next witness, and so on and so forth. And apparently Scott mentioned that he was an apprentice carpenter, and on Traficant's farm, it was Traficant's contention that he did some of his own carpentry work on one of the buildings where one of the farm hands or something like that was staying or whatever. And he put in some electrical fixtures, some outlets, and he put in a new door and some paneling and stuff like that. And according to Scott, who was an apprentice carpenter, the pictures that they passed around, he says that there's no way. It was the state's contention that this was done by some one of the guys in return for Traficant's favor on on something, I don't know, getting his divorce fixed or something or other. But Traficant said, no, I did that myself. He knew who the guy was and stuff, but he did it himself. But like I say, according to the state, this was done professionally and all this other stuff. And according to Scott, he says from the pictures he can tell that this is strictly amateur and that there's no way that a carpenter or a remodeler or anybody in business to do this type of work would have done that. He says it's just not possible. So that's why he felt that, again, this guy, the government's witness and stuff, was like, he was on the jury, I mean on the witness stand, testifying according to the government's script, that he had some other issues with the government, and that if he testified in this manner, the government was going to make this other issue go away, but at least they'll get a conviction on trafficking. And again, this stuff I found out after the fact and after the verdict and stuff, that there were several government witnesses that were testifying under immunity. What does that mean? Well, that the government's not going to prosecute them for testifying in a particular way that they testified, or they were supposed to be eyewitnesses and stuff like that, that they weren't going to testify. So it doesn't matter how much you lie on it, as long as you follow the government's script. Yeah, that's what happened, and you'll swear up and down that that's what happened, because you know that the government isn't gonna prosecute you for that. In addition, these people had other issues, side issues that had nothing to do with trafficking. But because they knew him or that they had some association with him at one time or another, the government said, we can make this other issue go away right now if you testify about this on the trafficking track. You got immunity, so why not? And, you know, you find out these things after the thing and after questioning, and did you know this, and did you? So it was all too late. While Traficant was in prison, he wasn't accepting any correspondence or anything, not even from his family. And I didn't want to do anything anyway because, like I say, I don't want to make anything worse. So when he did come out of prison, in Youngstown, they had that welcome home gym thing. I was there too. And Jim would never leave any kind of conference or meeting or anything like that without saying hello or goodbye to everybody that's in the room. There was over 1,500 people there, I think. When I think Pete was there too, weren't you? Yeah. So anyway, I went down there and I sat at a table with some other people that I had met over the. I even campaigned for Traficant while he was trying to run for Congress in prison and stuff. So I met some other people that were associated with this campaign, and we were sitting at one table and we waited until everything was through. And that was the first time that I've spoken to Jim face to face since our encounter at the sentencing and stuff. And I explained to him what happened and what went on in the jury room. Sort of quickly went over it, and so I told him I'm gonna make it really detailed. That's where I came up with the 8-page affidavit that's online now. And you know, I told Jim, you know, this is what happened, and this is why I finally had to cave in, because I'm hopefully I'm still gonna get to talk to the U.S. Attorney about my own issues with the school district and stuff. So Jim told me at that time that, look, I've been in politics longer than you have. I know the way things work. I know what's going on and stuff like that. He said, I had no doubt about it and stuff. And you know, till his last days and stuff. Here's another interesting thing. I had one of the last places that Jim gave a speech or a thing with this Project Freedom USA was down in Tennessee. And I got a hold of Jim Condit. That was the first time I talked to him about this thing down in Tennessee, and that I was going to drive down to Tennessee from Cleveland, and I want to see this. I want to hear what he has to say about it. That's the first time I found out about Project Freedom USA. So I drove down there and met with Jim again down there and talked after that meeting. And we had said to each other that we got to get together again and have another long conversation, and not only about the affidavit, which he's had a copy of and stuff like that. So about some other issues, he says, that were coming up, and that he says was gonna be monumental and was gonna be a big deal. Okay, so about a week passed and stuff, and he gave me a call, and he says, "How about having breakfast?" Okay. So I drove down to Youngstown, Poland. He lives in the suburb off of Youngstown, Poland. And we had breakfast. Friendly's restaurant, I think it was, real close to his house and stuff like from about 10 o'clock until about 11:15, and we parted. And we were going to get together again. We talked about a lot of things. I got him some more documentation and stuff that he requested. So I went, like I say, 11:15 he went. He said he had to go some other place. Well, if memory serves me right, I think it was on a Tuesday. Yeah. So, no, maybe it was Monday, because I had to take my rental car back the following day. And in the morning, about 8 o'clock, on my way taking back to the rental car, I heard on the news, on the radio, that Jim Traficant had an accident last night at 8 o'clock. I'm thinking to myself, wow, I just talked to the guy 9 hours ago, and here he's got an accident on his farm. I almost ran off the road, you know. So when I came back home after I returned the rental car, is when listening to the news, and it was big news and stuff, and I thought to myself, no way. An accident, come on. So, well, that's another part of the story and stuff. So I had breakfast with him about 8 to 10 hours before he had his accident. So that was last time I spoke to him, and went to his memorial that they had down in Youngstown for him. That was very well done. And now the latest thing I found out is about this American Free Press memorial you guys are having a year after. So that's how I got here, and thanks for listening. Oh, one other thing, I just want to, Jim always mentioned that prison was gladiator school for him. And a friend of mine gave me a photoshopped gladiator school. And it's actually from a movie Spartacus with Kirk Douglas, I think. And this is his graduation picture. So I gave him, I had this photograph with him, and he was giving some kind of speech, I forget where in Ohio, but I went down there again to see that, and asked him to autograph it. And he autographed it, and it says, "Leo, stop putting me in prison." I hope I didn't cut into your time.
No. That would not be a tragedy. I'm Jim Conner Jr. Pete Papa Hercules asked me to come up and ask if anybody had any questions. I just wanted to clarify and emphasize one thing. First of all, again, there maybe somebody here can remind me of when another juror in such a controversial, high-profile case came out and said afterwards, and I think you told me you had misgivings on the way home from the jury room, right? Because
Right.
there's all kinds of pressure. I've been in these things before, and they got 2 planted or more planted people there. But that actually came out and reversed himself, and he said it was like the worst decision he ever made. Juror number 8. It takes a lot of courage and humility to admit you're wrong. I can't think of another high-profile case where a juror came out like that, but maybe somebody else can. But it's very rare what Leo did.
It isn't so much that it was the worst mistake I've ever made in my life. It's the way that the government presented there or prosecuted the case, and how could this be possible? You know, especially in the jury room. You know, these things that went on in the jury room, and even on those van rides back and forth to the courtroom and stuff, you know, when we were instructed, you know, not supposed to be talking about this thing amongst yourselves or whatever, about what one, and even the U.S. attorneys that were supposed to be babysitting us and instructing us what to do. I remember one instance where we were coming back from lunch, and one of the U.S. attorneys said, U.S. Marshals that were escorting us, he said that the next witness that's coming on is Traficant's girlfriend. So I'm thinking to myself, what the heck? And turned out to be, again, after the trial, Linda, what's his,
Linda Kovacic.
Kovacic, that's right. She was his campaign manager or maybe a secretary or something like that, yeah. It was Linda Kovacic.
Yeah.
But the U.S. Marshals told all of us, this is Traficant's girlfriend, you know? And, you know, just one thing after another. And when you tell this to other people and stuff like that, no, you're crazy. You're embellishing everything, you know? It couldn't have been. No way. Not in U.S. Justice Department and courtroom, a federal court. Are you kidding me? That's what's going on? You must be wrong. You're,
Yeah.
you know, nobody believes you.
Excuse me. What was the name of the 2 jurors that you felt were like strong-arming everybody?
Okay, in the affidavit, I mentioned 3, maybe 4 jurors by name. And the reason I did that, the rest of the jurors, I just mentioned by number, okay? The reason I mentioned those people by name is because once the verdict was given, the judge came into the deliberation room and asked if anybody wants to talk to the media. We had already discussed that even before we went into deliberation. Nobody wants to talk to the media. Nobody wants to be known as to who they are, and we'll want to forget this whole thing, this whole incident. And then when the judge comes in and asks for volunteers, all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, geez, oh man. First of all, it was Jerry Zimmerman. She was the one that I feel was the one that was predisposed. The other one, Helen, I forget her last name, she was the forewoman, maybe or probably predisposed. And Jill, I forget what their last names are, but she was sitting next to me. I was surprised that she would come in because she was very quiet and very you know, so they went in front of the cameras, and if there was a 4th one, I don't remember what her name was. Again, it's probably in the affidavit. But since they went in front of the cameras, everybody knows who they were. Okay, I figured it's okay for me to say who they were also. Okay, and even I'd say when we were getting close to the end of the trial, somebody one of the jurors came up with the idea of let's pass around all of our names and addresses, and then in 1 year from the verdict, we're going to get together, sort of like a high school reunion. Okay, so we all wrote our name and address, Some of us wrote our phone numbers. You didn't have that phone, the phone number was optional. So we had that list. The next day she came in and she put everything on WordPerfect or whatever the thing was. Everything was typed out real nice. Again, we went home. I made copies of it because I thought, well, maybe I'm gonna lose it or something like this. So I made 5 copies of it. Kept the original. When we got back the second day, we were all in the jury room in the morning. The U.S. Marshal came in and said that he got word that we had made a list and addresses where we were going to stay in touch and stuff. He says, you can't do that.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to confiscate everything. Okay, so everybody had to turn in the list. I had no problem. Here's my list. I got 5 other copies at home and stuff, you know. And then after the verdict and stuff, on the 1-year anniversary, I sent a letter around to everybody, all of the jurors, with the exception of Scott Grody because he wasn't in on deliberation. The alternate was in there. I sent it around to all 12 jurors that were involved in the verdict. No response from nobody. Sent it around the second time to where I had proof of mailing that I at least sent it. So they can't say, well, I never got that letter. So again, nobody responded to it. And again, a few more years later, probably when Traficant was out of prison already, just by coincidence, I ran into one of the jurors who was not mentioned by name in the affidavit, mentioned by number, but not by name. Purely an accident that we ran into, you know, how you doing, and everything was great and stuff like that. And stuff, I says, did you get that letter from me that we're supposed to have a reunion and stuff? She says, yeah, but I couldn't make it. I said, you couldn't make it, or you were told not to make it, and stuff. So, because I mentioned her in the affidavit by number and stuff, and she says, no comment. She got very serious and, you know, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me after.
Sounds like what they did to the U.S. Liberty crew by separating them and telling them not to talk to each other. So it sounds like the same stuff
Well,
they did to you guys.
I don't know, you know, like I say, I'm not a lawyer and I've never been at a trial and stuff like that, and so I don't know, maybe I broke a law or something like that by coming out and giving the name or trying to get in touch with them, and it's supposed to be privacies or whatever. I don't know, you know, but I'm sure that there were jurors that have written books and stuff, became famous or whatever. So I don't know if I broke the law or not.
Let me, before we have any more questions, let me just do 2 quick other issues here, then we'll take the other questions. Let me just get this straight about this fellow Grody. His first name is what?
Grody.
Grody, what's his
Yeah,
first
you got
name?
it.
Scott.
Scott.
Okay, he's letting it be known right as they're getting to decision day, I'm not going to convict Traficant. He's kind of certain about it, right?
To all of the smokers.
Okay, I'm not gonna, and so Zimmerman knows, okay.
Right, because she's a smoker.
Okay. The aunt gets killed in the car wreck, and he goes, and the judge wants him to go to the funeral, and he says, well, if you're not gonna stop the trial, I'd rather stay here and vote, I'll go visit her graveyard. And then when he leaves, she dismisses him and gets the juror in that's favorable with convicting Traficant. Now, did I say that right, or do you want to correct me?
Yes, in his affidavit, he spells out the whole thing, that he felt that this was, and this is the reason, and it was his understanding that the judge is going to let him go to the funeral, and that he'd be able to come back, and so I don't know if he got a phone call or whatever, and he was expecting to fully come back and stay on that jury, but in my estimation, or in my thing, that's the reason why he got booted off, was probably the U.S. Marshals heard it, but that one predisposed juror is the one that got a hold of the state.
So, and one vote would have kept Traficant out of jail, they would have wasted everything. Finally, you gave your finally you gave your affidavit out to the media at some point, trying to get some attention, and except for Hannity and Combs, what happened?
Greta Van Susteren too, she was gonna have me on, but like I said, it was only for about 2 minutes. I have copies of those on VHS, because I taped all of that, just the same way with the C-SPAN coverage of when they were debating about expelling Traficant. There's another story there. Quickly, one of the congressmen that was on the panel that was deliberating or making their recommendations to the full House as to whether or not expel him, they had sort of a trial to where people came up and they were testifying, and Traficant again was representing himself and stuff. But the end result was going to be that this committee was going to recommend whether or not to expel Traficant to the full House. One of the guys on there was my congressman. I went to see him. I had during these proceedings, he happened to be home. I don't know if it was like the 4th of July break or there was one day or something like that. So I went to see him. I made an appointment to talk to him about my other issue with the local school district and about my 2 deaf kids. And he was very receptive and was talking about, you know, he's going to see what he can do about it. He's going to see what he can do about it. Okay, so on my way out of his office, going down the hall, I asked him, I says, you're on that committee whether to expel Traficant or not. Yeah. I says, well, maybe you can do me another favor. I says, I was one of the jurors on there. Is there any way that I can testify in front of the panel as to what I think and what issues I have with the trial and stuff? And he says, you were on the jury? I said, yeah, you know, the juror number 8. I said, yeah, I'd be very interested in hearing what you say. He gave me the number of the House prosecutor, the one that, Joe something, I forget, I got all this stuff written on. But anyway, he gave me the phone number. He says, give him a call as soon as you can and make arrangements with him. I told him I'd be willing to, at my own expense, go to DC and go in front of the panel and everything. I just want to get certain things clarified. And maybe the stuff that's in the affidavit, but this was before the affidavit. So I went home, I called him, it was in the afternoon. I called that number, all you do is get a recording. As I told him, Leo Glazer, juror number 8, I was asked by Congressman so-and-so to testify. If I could testify, I'll pay for everything on my own. You don't have to reimburse me for nothing. Please call me back. Here's my number. Nothing happened that night. The next day, I called in the morning, about 10 or 11 o'clock. Same message. Blah blah blah. I called yesterday. Please get back to me. Let me know one way or the other. Either I can testify or go to hell. I don't care. So again, nothing. That afternoon, about 3 o'clock, I called for the 3rd time. Again, no response. The second day after that, I called again in the morning. This is 4th time now. Please let me know one way or the other. In the afternoon, for the 5th time, I said that's it. I says, I'm not going to bother you anymore. Thanks for not even calling me back. You know, least you could have told me was, nah, we're not interested in what you've got to say. You've done your job. You've convicted them. Thanks a lot. You know, but nothing. And that's the way it's been with all of the mainstream media. And nobody's interested in it. I would mail that affidavit and stuff. Please, let me know one way or the other. Either you're interested or you're not interested. 3rd choice, go to hell, okay? Nobody wants to tell you that the mainstream. They don't want to hear, you've done your job. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Pete, we're ready to go to the next speaker, right? I cut one person off, though. Leo, you'll be around a while, right?
Oh,
For
yeah.
people to talk to. Somebody had a question, I cut you off, or no? Okay, Leo will be around.
Yeah.
Leo, thank you very much. For those who have said that Traficant, well, maybe he wasn't a big criminal, but maybe a little criminal, but he was still a criminal. Well, here's evidence from the horse's mouth, as they say, not to be calling you a horse, that it was all tampered with in various ways. And thank you very much. I'm sure it took a lot of courage for you to come up and publicly say all those things, and we thank you. My next speaker is going to be the person that made this wonderful video that we saw earlier, Jim Rizzoli. Jim is a videographer. He has a cable network that
Used to.
used to have a cable network until the usual suspects didn't like it and have been giving him a hard time about it. So he's been fighting his own battle here for a long time, over a decade, I'm sure. Jim has done some wonderful work and put out a lot of good videos. He's an excellent speaker. I've heard him speak at Paul Petty's Freedom Palooza several times. And the other thing, what did I want to say about you? I think he also has a second video that
Well,
we'll
there's
see.
something that's going to be played later.
There's something that's also going to be played later. So again, we want to thank you for the video. It was a beautiful, wonderful video, and would like to hear your version of the story.
Okay.
Jim Rizzoli, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thank you, folks here. I'm glad to be here. I haven't been really speaking too much lately. They do their best to try to stop me everywhere I go, but I haven't been arrested. I'm not in jail yet, so that's a good sign. Okay? But it might get to that at some
We're
point.
still free, Jim. We're still free.
Yeah, for now, anyway. I just want to give you a little bit of a background of myself. I got involved with an issue, say, 2012, thereabouts, not 12, 2002, in my town. And the issue was an immigration issue, right? This is when in Massachusetts, anyway, where I live, the immigrants were just flocking in by the thousands. I mean, they just came into Massachusetts like crazy. And my brother actually started a group of people, small group of people, that dealt with the immigration issue. And we try to get people involved so that we can fight against it, because it was just horrible. And my website, if you want to go to that website, ccfiile.com. That is my website. Concerned Citizens and Friends of Illegal Immigration Law Enforcement was that acronym. That's what it stood for. But that was just the beginning of my life, okay? Once I got into the immigration issue in my town in Massachusetts, I had a lot of visibility. In Boston, if they wanted to talk about the immigration issue, I'm talking the networks. I've been on all the network news. You don't know anything about me, but when I was really going hot at this point in time in Boston, anytime they wanted to talk about immigration issues, the major news stations would come to me. All of them call me. PBS call me. Anytime anything dealing with illegal immigration, call Rizzoli. All right. So things were going pretty well, dealing with the immigration issue. We talk about it. We get people involved. But then what happens is they label you as a racist,
Yeah.
and that's what happens. That becomes a really bad thing that happens. And you have some people that will jump on your side, but then what happens is you get marginalized, and that's the end of you. So here I am. I ran for state representative. I ran for selectman in my town, and this and that. And obviously, when you have the racist thing on your head, you're not going to go anywhere. All right? I mean, I'm just telling you, okay? So if you want to get involved in politics, you better not be involved in anything that's controversial because they'll bury you. But that's nothing, okay? That was nothing. So now the immigration issues are going along, blah, blah, blah. And then, I have 4 cable shows in town. Everything's going great. I'm known everywhere. People see me. I'm in a store, I'm at McDonald's. People come up to me, shake my hand. Oh, I really like your show, blah, blah, blah. Well, show 86. Good old show 86. That was one that I remember well because that's the topic. That's when I came out of the closet. All right? I came out of the closet and I talked about the only issue you cannot talk about in the whole world, and that's the Holocaust. That was it. Okay? So my whole show, Good Pile Show, show 86 was on the Holocaust. Well, yeah, I mean, all about that.
You know what 86 is, right, please?
Huh?
When somebody gets 86?
Oh, no, I didn't know.
Well, when you get 86, you get...
Oh, well, there you go.
There you
Perfect.
go, brother.
That was perfect. Well, anyway, so now I have a business in town, and a lot of my clientele were Jews. All right, so 75% of my business gone, just like that, overnight, gone. All right. But the only problem was that it didn't matter to me if I worked or not worked. I didn't care. I mean, I could survive, and financially it was not a problem. And so I lost all my Jewish clientele. Now, I'm in a business network. I was in the business network 15 years. They kicked me out. I mean, they kicked me out. I was a good person. I worked with everybody. We all worked well together. But just because of that one topic, they didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore. So there, I'm a pariah. I mean, look at me. I mean, no, I have no home anymore. I have no home. I lost pretty much most of my clientele. But it actually works out good because what people don't understand is when you know how doors open. Well, what they did was I stopped working, but now guess what I can devote all my time to? Oh my goodness, I can devote all my time to my favorite topic. Okay, and so now, boom, I'm just out there. I'm pushing away with my cable shows, and I'm just blasted them now. I had 1 show, went up to 2 shows. I have 4 shows. I'm producing, I'm on TV 16 times a week. I'm just pounding these people into the ground with the topic. I mean, pounding them. I can just imagine. The ADL is coming after me now. Everybody's coming after me. And then all of a sudden, bam, my cable company just said, you're breaking all these rules and this and that, and they took me off in 2010. So they took me off, and then I was off for a year, and I came back on again in 2011, and this time I'm even worse. I'm pounding away at them again, and then boom, they came after me again. It's just in 2014. I'll tell you what happened here. The show had to do with, I was trying to explain, because my topic is the Holocaust. I was trying to explain to them that when a body dies by carbon monoxide, okay, that you turn pink, all right? Because a lot of people said that the people in the gas chambers were black and blue. Well, that couldn't happen because you turn pink. So I had a picture of a body, a back end of a woman's body. I think it's on the site nazigassings.com site. And I show what you look like when you were gassed, and you look pink. Well, the cable company didn't like that because they said, oh, you're putting nudity on your site. Can you imagine that? Now, here's a picture that's used all through history. Everywhere you can use it. PBS will use it on their stations. Anyone will use it. It's not nudity. But see, there's a clause when I signed the contract that said I wouldn't have nudity in my show. The problem is I didn't have nudity in my show. I had a nude body trying to make a point about a historical event that happened at some point in time. But they had me. Oh, you had nudity on your show? You're off the air? And they took me off the air for a year and a half, and then something else happened, and I'm banned forever. Okay? That's the way it goes. So now I'm banned. And now I'm trying to get other people going to produce shows. I am so banned that they won't even let me produce shows for anybody else. That's how banned I am. My name was in a show. My name. The name came up. And Rizzoli's name's in that show. And they question the show. And so that's where I stand now with them. I mean, I can't even be anywhere with my name in a show or anything like that. But just shows you, again, what's going on in that business in regards to how people want to stop the message. So, anyway.
It takes courage.
Well, I mean, you just keep going. I mean, the thing is, I don't back down to anyone. I just keep going, and that's how it is. So, I mean, thank you. I mean, it's the least I can do. Now, so that's where I stand now, in regards to my background, and I've produced thousands of shows and thousands of videos. YouTube, I had a nice channel, 600 videos, 700 videos. The Jews came after me. I mean, on Facebook, boom, get Rizzoli. They banned my show. They banned all my YouTube videos. Took them right down. One day. The Jews came after me, and I was off the air in one day. That's how powerful these people are. To take a YouTube channel down, that's incredible. This is phenomenal. It doesn't stop there. I'm on Facebook. Jim Rizzoli on Facebook. Banned. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything on Facebook. I was just putting stuff up, links here and there. They banned me on Facebook. So my name's not on Facebook as my name anymore. It's Jamie Rambo. All right? So there you go. So I'm on Facebook. As I have to use another name to be on Facebook. I mean, this is unbelievable. So now, anyway, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the Traficant video, which I think you might appreciate. Now, that's just not a collaboration of me. Peter sent me videos, and Jim Conduit sent me videos, and that's what happens. I'm like the cake maker. All right, you send me the pieces for the cake. I'll put the cake together. So it wasn't just a work on me, because they had to send me the videos and say, I want this video and this video and this video. And so I have to sit down now, because when you're dealing with video, one like that clip dealing with Phil Donahue was a 45-minute video. And so I had to go through that and just pick out pieces and pieces and pieces. And you got to cut it out, paste it together, and put it here. But I mean, it just takes a long time. I had 25 hours into that video, that one video, 25 hours. All right. So now that's how it is. So now I'm doing the video. I'm getting to get a lot of information about Jim Conduit and learning a lot about him. I mean, not Jim Conduit, Jim Traficant. I never knew much about him. I met him at Freedom Palooza, but not personally. He left by the time I got over to him. And so now I'm watching all these videos. I said, this is great, man. This man was phenomenal. I mean, I would guarantee if he ran for president, he'd be out doing Trump like nobody's business. He would. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that he would be doing this. Because he had it all together. Now, Trump might have some things together here, but Jim Traficant had it all together. He wasn't afraid of anybody. All right. So as I'm watching these, it's nice, because now I'm getting to really understand him and seeing what he stood for. I mean, he was a type of guy. I wish he was like my father. I mean, he could have been my father. You know what I'm saying? And it was just such a pleasure to do that video. It really was. I mean, I was so happy when I got the call for that video. I said, I'll be more than happy to put a video together about him, and because I really respected him. Because I don't do videos for anybody. Believe me, I get a lot of these politicians or somebody doing this or do that want me to do video for them, and unless it's the right topic for me, I will not do anything for them. So I only do video for a certain amount of people. So that's why the Jim Traficant video was a privilege for me to do. I really loved it. It was very enjoyable. And I actually cry every time I watch it. I mean, really. I mean,
You're going to post that for everybody?
Yeah, I'm eventually going to post it. Right. But anyway, so it was great. I really enjoyed doing it. It was a great video. Like I said, it wasn't just me putting. I mean, I put it together, but again, I'm just a chef putting all the ingredients together, and I made it what it was. But I really think that we need people now to come into this movement here, whether it's my end of it, the revisionist movement, or the AFP, that end of it, and on the other subjects you deal with. We really have to get new blood in here to get people, really cranking with this message. And I met John Friend, and I mean, he's phenomenal in his website and what he talks about. I mean, and these are the young people you really have to start encouraging to get going, because, we oldsters here, I mean, we're running out of steam, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, it gets hard to be able to, do this and do that.
You're not running out of steam.
Well, I'm trying not to run out of steam, but
You're just fine.
well, you'd be surprised. I got some flat tires every now and then. But the thing that I'm involved with now is it's called the League of Extraordinary Revisionists, and that's what I'm involved with now.
Love it.
And what I'm doing is I'm interviewing all the older revisionists. For instance, my first interview was Fred Lukta, and he had to do with the Lukta report and the Auschwitz findings. The next one was Robert Farrason. I interviewed him on Skype. I got that one up. And just yesterday, I don't like to waste time as I'm coming into Washington, as I'm coming down in Pennsylvania, we stopped over and I met Grandma Rudolph. And I interviewed him for 2 hours yesterday. Phenomenal video. He was just tremendous. And in regards to persecution, Grandma Rudolph, he went to prison for 44 months. And why did he go to prison? Because he wrote some books. He just wrote books.
Yeah.
He wrote books about findings in Auschwitz. That the fact is that cyanide poisoning, you can't kill people the way they said that happened at Auschwitz in those camps, just like Fred Lukta did. So that video I'm working on right now, I actually have it put together pretty much. I just got to finish some loose ends on it. And that video is going to be available too. And that's, again, the League of Extraordinary Revisionists. I would love to, who's our next one we going?
Tobin.
I'm going to interview Tobin. All right, Tobin's in Australia. Love to interview Zundel. That's going to be a tough one to get Zundel. But that is my passion. And Diane has been helping me. I couldn't do it without her. She's the one that's organizing this. I mean, really. I mean, honestly, if she wasn't behind this, and if I never met her, this wouldn't have happened. Because I just didn't have the steam to do it, and she's pushing me. She's pushing me along the way to do it, and she's making all the agreements and meeting the people, getting it all together. I'm just doing this end of it. So I really appreciate this. So, the women, you think the women in the movements don't do anything, but they're very important for us too. They support us. So that's important. So the thing is that everyone here has a part to play. All right, and this is important. You might say, well, what can I do? Well, here's what you can do. All right, and I'm going to spell it out to you, really simple. All right, if you have money, you donate and help the people that are doing stuff. Really, if you give someone $100 or $50 or this, you'd be surprised how that helps somebody. Okay, if you have talents, if you do have some sort of video talent, or you are good in front of a camera and you want to get yourself out there too, please do something like that. Get into that aspect of it. All right. If you write, phenomenal writer. Right. I mean, John Frank, phenomenal writer. I've read his stuff. Phenomenal. All right. That's his talent. That's what he can do. I'm sure he can do other things, but everybody has a gift. We all have gifts. My gift, I don't know exactly what it is, but my gifts are what I'm doing now. Okay, to do what I'm doing. So use your gift, whatever you have. God has given you talents or something. If you know someone to make a connection, you'd be surprised. I was on an internet show the other night, and we wanted to find a name. There's an excellent book if you ever want to read this book, The Myth of Auschwitz, Benton Bradbury.
German villainy.
The myth of
German villainy.
The Myth of German Villainy. The Myth of German Villainy by Benton Bradbury. All right, we wanted to get in touch with this guy. All right, so I'm on this. What was the show? Rents.
No, it was Aaron.
Aaron's
show.
Aaron's show. And so she knew him. She knew who he was. So she got us the telephone number. We were able to call him, get in touch with him, and that was a good thing. You see how things work out? So there's people you might know that might lead you to somewhere else, another door to open. You might think, oh, that's just a small thing, but that's a big thing. If it opens a door to get something cranking somewhere. So that's why everyone can do something. So don't be afraid. You see somebody out there doing something, figure out a way you can help them. Whatever way you can help them, you can help them. If they're going through your town one day, you can invite them to stay with you. If they're need some money for gas, you can help them with gas money or whatever you want to do. I've had a lot of people help me, and that's the reason why I keep going, because I've had a lot of people help me. I'm not just by myself doing this, so I really appreciate any help, and that's what we want to do. But anyway, I think I can probably sum it up here. I think, you know, we don't have a huge amount of people here, but, what's that?
Good quality.
Right, that's the point, you know. I look at groups like this, like even when we have Freedom Palooza, you know, we might have 50 people there, 100 people there. But you know something, I'm saying to myself, wow, it's really worth being here because we're with a core group of people that really are good. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a good, I mean, to come down here to Washington, I'm driving down here and I was like, whoa, what, I'm not even coming here. But I'm telling you, I mean, you know, but it was worth it. And, you know, when you're with people that are good people, it encourages you. I mean, imagine coming in if there's only 2 people. I mean, you wouldn't be too encouraged. But, I mean, you know, this is a good group of people. So I'm encouraged, and that makes me want to go on and help, you know, do more work and help other people that want to get into the business or whatever talents they have to use. So I'm just happy. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be able to be somewhere and talk. Okay,
Yeah.
you know, because I get banned everywhere. There's an email list in my town, and the email list, I'm on the town politics of the town. They kicked me off it. Okay, they kicked me off that list. I have no place to hang my hat. You know what I mean? Every place I go, they kick me off. But you know, I'm like that little thing you hit and it pops up over here and it pops up over here. You know, you go to the carnival, you can see my face. You know what I mean? On that little head. But anyway, you know, you can get very discouraged. But you know, you just keep going. And here's the thing. I'll just leave you with this thought. You know, I look at life this way. If I'm going to go down, okay, if I'm going to go down, and I could be going down, I'm going to go down standing up. I'm not going down on my knees, all right? And that's where they want to put you, okay? They want to put you on your knees. They want you to grovel to them, okay? I'm not going to grovel to them. You're going to have to kill me standing up in my place. So that's the only thing I can say to you. If you want to just plug away, don't be afraid of them. But again, count the cost. Because if you're going to take the subject on, you're going to count the cost because they're going to come after you. They're going to stop you. They're going to try to stop you. It's not a popular topic. Everything we talk about here is not popular. So anyway, I encourage you. And again, thank you, folks. And thank you, Peter, for inviting me down.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was an excellent speech, very inspiring.
Tell him he's got a home on the American Free Press website.
Well, I was going to say that. You definitely have a home, the American Free Press website, and on the Barnes Review website even more, because that's right up our alley, as you know, Holocaust revisionism. And you didn't mention that one of your hopes in coming down here was to meet Willis Carto,
Yeah.
the godfather of revisionism, and interview him. And who deserves to be in that group more than he does? And unfortunately, he left us. And also, unfortunately, he didn't give that many interviews. You know, in hindsight, he's given speeches, and we have videos of his speeches. He didn't give too many interviews. But the Barnes Review and the IHR, which Willis had started back in, I guess, the late 80s, was it? Had the same experiences that you did. As a matter of fact, the Jews ended up just torching the place, you know, so, and eventually took Willis down, destroyed the Spotlight and Liberty Lobby, and American Free Press is essentially a shadow of what the Spotlight was, at least as far as people goes, not as far as quality, for sure. Let's make that distinction. So we look forward to working with you in the future, because videos are a little bit of our weakness. I mean, we do much in print and all that, but nowadays doing videos is a great thing. And I saw your Fred Lecter interview. I thought it was it Luchter? Yeah, Lucher. I've heard it said always, but yeah, he was. That's one person that I mean, he's got scientific evidence right there. There's no way you can argue with that. Short of put somebody in jail or kill him, you can't argue with that evidence. So very commendable to have done what you're doing, and of course you're paying the price, because as you said, like you said, that's the ultimate sin when it comes to the Jews and Zionism. So you're very commended. Our next speaker. we've had several people die recently, as we said, Willis Carto, Jim Traficant, Mike Piper. But before them, the first one was Edgar Steele. And Edgar Steele, most of you I'm sure know him, perhaps some of you don't, was again an outspoken figure, especially for the white nationalist movement, but just in general. And he spoke the truth, and he talked about the Jews and talked about the Holocaust and the whole bowl of wax. And but he specifically was focused on the race issue and how the white race has been targeted, as we know, by all these different means for genocide is one of the ways it can be described. But certainly that we were at fault for being racist and oppressing everybody under the sun. So he made the grave mistake of defending some prominent white nationalists like the Aryan nations and some others, and the Jews targeted him and took him down. Very few people had the ability to explain the issues in such an eloquent way as he did, and he was a lawyer, a very good lawyer at that, and was able to present things in a way that everybody can understand. So I think he was one of the nails that stood up the highest, and the Jews had to take him down. So they set up this situation of where he allegedly tried to kill his wife, who never had any complaints about her husband trying to kill her. She was out trying to support him. But they set up a kangaroo court, locked him up, and just like, well, yeah, there you go, murdered him. Sure. Everything points to that direction. So I've met Cindy Steele. I went up to Idaho with a couple of friends of mine that are here, and I had first met her and interviewed her. Before Edgar was actually sentenced, at least before he went to prison. So, and I got to know her, and since then I've seen her at the Freedom Palooza conferences. She was always one of the best assets of those great efforts that Paul DePetti put together. And she got to know Jim, and I wanted her to be a speaker because Edgar's demise, if you will, has a lot of parallels with Jim's death, and because she also knew him. And I want to introduce her all the way from Idaho, Cindy Steele.
Hi. I'm going to just start out and say one of the things my husband used to say. There's no justice for the politically incorrect. And I've learned that probably in the hardest way possible. The government came after my husband with manufactured evidence, lies. They were willing to perjure themselves. And why? Because he had the courage to stand up, speak about all the injustices, protect our freedom. His main one was freedom of speech, and he wasn't afraid to use our constitutional right to speak out. But the government, the SPLC, and everybody else didn't like that. When they would challenge him, he would challenge back and would give it right back to him and challenge them on every point. So they came after him. And why? Well, manufactured evidence that he was going to kill me and my mom. It was followed up by a judicial system that was playing right along. They didn't follow procedures. They broke laws. Kept the evidence out of the jury trial. The main evidence against my husband was 2 recordings, which we had 2 talk witnesses, experts that had debunked the recordings. When I first listened to them, I knew that they were wrong, not because I just believed in my heart that my husband would never do that, but there were things wrong with the recordings. But I also knew that the government wasn't going to just take my word for it, even though I was the one that was supposedly in danger. So we got experts, but guess what? They kept our experts out, and it would be a really long story, but they skillfully did that. I've heard a lot of things that have parallels with what I experienced with my husband. In Jim Traficant's case, what's going on with Jim Zoli here. You know, I used to say, oh, my government wouldn't do that. I no longer say that. You know, my husband sort of brought me along. He got me on board because I witnessed what was happening, especially after he represented the Aryan nations, primarily Richard Butler. But I'll tell you, if I had any doubt of what our government was capable of, I no longer had it because I was experiencing it. You know, even after sentencing, I guess I have to, before sentencing, we even found out they went to the extent and got to my husband's attorney, who really, for all purposes, threw my husband under the bus. He was in the pocket of the government and the prosecution. They were protecting the confidential informant that they used to set up my husband. I mean, talk about discrepancies. He supposedly put a bomb on my car, got 2 years, and is out and already off of probation. Totally free. In fact, I had the unpleasant experience of running into him at the post office about a month ago. You know, he's free. My husband's not. Well, depends on how I look at it, but you know, he's lost his life because of what he was willing to stand up for. And, you know, the justices just kept happening, even after his sentencing. They refused to let me see him. I had not seen my husband since November 2011. They finally eased up and I could talk to him on the phone 15 minutes at a time. I could sometimes write him emails, sometimes not, because they would interfere with him. He was trying to actually write from prison and getting writings out to me. It got almost impossible because I wouldn't get them, or he wouldn't get my editing of it, because I'd enter it in on the computer and I'd send it back. He'd try to correct it. Well, they were very much interfering with that. They were constantly neglecting him medically, and I knew it. I kept fighting for them to treat him better. And then came the one sad day that it just, you know, I've already been through hell and back. He's being put through hell. And I get a call, not from the prison, not from a chaplain, nobody. I get a call from the mortuary, and the first thing out of their mouth was, "What would you like done with his remains?" And to sort of line that up, I already hadn't heard from him for 2 weeks. I was already sort of fit to be tied because, you know, sometimes it was because they were in lockdown or they weren't allowed to make calls, and I understood that. But I hadn't heard from him for 2 weeks, and usually if I hadn't heard from him for 2 weeks, I did at least get a letter letting me know that he was in lockdown. I didn't get that. So I was already pretty much uptight, wondering what was going on. So, yeah. I actually had to ask the person on the other phone if my husband had passed away, and sadly it was confirmed. continue the injustices, I set up a service. We already had burial plots in Oregon where my mom was laid to rest during this period of time also. And all of a sudden I get a call from the funeral director telling me, "I'm sorry, we cannot perform the service for your husband." When I challenged him on why, he would not admit it was because who my husband was, but I knew in my heart that was why. So even through his death, I was facing the issues that we're all facing because we are willing to be politically incorrect to fight for what we know is right, what our forefathers fought for our freedoms and our liberty. It was what my husband did. Now, I know I'm here to be talking about Jim Traficant because, we have unfortunately lost him, another great speaker. But I can't talk about Jim without talking about my husband because there are so many parallels that I see. Listening to everybody that has spoke here, talking about Jim's time that he went through prison and that he was unjustly convicted. So when I first met Jim, it was at Freedom Palooza in 2011. It was after my husband had been convicted but not sentenced. He gave me hope at a time that it felt very hopeless. He reminded me a lot of my husband because he spoke up, he eloquently spoke up, and he was willing, even despite what he'd been through, he was still standing up for our country and for our fellow Americans, or fellow patriots. So he gave me courage to continue, and I did continue to fight. Up until the death of my husband, I was fighting. We were getting ready to try to get him a second trial. And unfortunately, I'm never going to get that second trial. I'm not going to be able to clear his name in the public eye. Personally, I don't need to because I do know what the truth is, and that's what I have to, that's what I have to live with. And I understand how it's not easy for what these men and men like them do. We have a government that's that is so out of control that they are willing to break all our laws to benefit them. I mean, they're not really working for us anymore. We have a mass media that, as I know Jim knows and everybody here knows, is that they will demonize you if you dare to speak anything about race, anything about the Jews. It doesn't matter if it's the truth or not, they will demonize you. My husband had, right out of the gate, the minute he was arrested, everything on the news was demonization. He was a racist. He was a supremacist. He was an anti-Semite. He was this. Now, he spoke about those issues, but I can go down and I can tell you why he was not a racist. He saw the issues and he was willing to talk about the issues, but in reality, as his mantra was, he was after oh gosh, it just went out of my head. Equal rights for all, and special rights for none.
Yeah, for none. Yeah.
That was, but they would overlook that. They wouldn't look at that. That he was really after equal rights for all and special rights for none. No, he was a racist. He was an anti-Semite. He was a supremacist. Even when I approached the media with evidence that I had about my husband being innocent. Oh, they'd come interview me, but when it came to the reports on the media, all that evidence was left out. I could not get the fact that I believed the government was actually after me too in regards to the bomb that I found on my car. Because there were so many discrepancies with the video and with the audio and the things that were told to me, that it's one or two ways. You know, either what was on the audio tape was spliced in after the fact when I found the bomb, or the government knew 6 days ahead of time before I found the bomb on my car that I had it on my car. It's one or two ways. It can't be, there's just no way that it can be either way. But would the media, would they, expose that? No. We have the main FBI agent that the attorney that first represented him kept in the file and didn't use it in the trial. There's an affidavit by an FBI agent that they were actually going to arrest my husband in March. Now, he wasn't arrested of 2010. He wasn't arrested until June 11th of 2010. Well, this very same FBI agent had told me, and in the in trial testified that he did not know my husband, did not know anything about my husband until June 8th of 2010. But there's an affidavit back in March. So it looks like they were trying to get him earlier, but something went wrong and they were covering their tracks. It was the best way we had to, at least in a trial setting, to show that that FBI agent was perjuring himself. Now, I knew he was perjuring himself a lot because he kept telling me a lot of lies that I was able to contradict. One of the reasons he wanted, my husband supposedly wanted me dead, was because we had a life insurance policy. I knew the minute he said that, I knew that was wrong. Oh, I had a boyfriend, and they had pictures. Well, I've never seen the pictures, and the reason I never saw the pictures is because they didn't have pictures. They were working on me. And the minute they got the message that I wasn't falling for their lies and I wasn't going to play the victim that they wanted, that they were trying to make me be, they started turning on me. I was blind. I didn't know what I was talking about. And there's a term that I'm Stockholm Syndrome. Thank you. Yes, I had Stockholm Syndrome. So, Leo talked about the jury and Traficant, and boy, as he's talking, so many things are ringing true. And frankly, the jury in my husband's trial, I'm not sure I can point any fingers at them. Not that I know, but I don't have any proof. I have suspicions because, like I said, there used to be a day I'd say my government wouldn't do that. Well, now I say my government will do anything when they want to silence a man. So I wouldn't be surprised, but here's the issue with the jury. I know the jury never heard the evidence. The prosecution got 4 days, I think, My husband barely got 1 day to put on his defense. Of course, you have to remember, which we unfortunately didn't learn until afterwards, they got to my husband's attorney and he threw him under the bus. He had no reason. He was trying to protect himself from going to prison. Now, he didn't protect himself totally, but I'm sure he didn't get as many years as he probably should have. We found out after the fact that my husband's attorney was being investigated for crimes during the same time that he was representing my husband. They, to the point where they were even going into Ed's attorney's office and going through files, meaning that the government was also looking at confidential files. Most likely my husband's files. When they indicted my husband's attorney, they disbarred him, which was a month after my husband's conviction. Then we didn't find out until 6 days after my husband's sentencing that there was a 29-count felony charge against the attorney. Why? Because they put it under seal. They had brought the 29 felony count, not conviction, but charges against the attorney back in July, but they put it under seal. And I've been told that is unprecedented, because as soon as the felony charges come down, it is supposed to be exposed. But no, they put it under seal until my husband's sentencing came down, and then they released it. And the reason that is important is because we would have had a much better chance of getting a new trial based on... thank you. Yes. But oh no, it was just coincidence, according to them. And we couldn't get the judge. We still were trying to get the judge to rule for a new trial based on that, but he wouldn't budge, and I don't know why I should have expected it. He was the one that made sure that our audio experts didn't get to testify. He was the one that made it very clear that he was behind what the prosecution was doing and going after my husband. Leo talked about something about how people are pressured, or they say things. And I remember one incident. It was actually at the confidential informant's one of his hearings, and he was asked to explain how he made the bomb that he put on my car. So I'm listening, and the confidential informant started to explain, and all of a sudden the judge stopped him dead in his tracks, and the judge proceeded to tell the confidential informant and the rest of us how that bomb was made and put on my car.
Should be big. Prime suspect.
I'm sitting there and I'm going,
Did the judge put the bomb on the car?
actually, I want to know if the FBI didn't put the bomb on my car.
Yes.
And the reason there's a lot of reasons why I say that. As much as I feel God has taken a lot away from me, I also feel that He was protecting me, because the day that I pulled in to have my oil changed on my car and the bomb was discovered was the very same day as the first hearing for my husband after his arrest. I had been traveling a lot. I had time to spare. I don't sit still. I decided I didn't need car problems, so I pulled in to have the oil changed. Oh, and that was under suspect too. why I would do that. But if I would not have stopped to have the oil changed, I wouldn't have been aware of that bomb in my car. 2 hours later, I would have been driving onto federal property. I would have had to think about it. I would have been on federal property with a bomb on my car, and believe me, they had Homeland Security casing the federal courthouse that day with sniffing dogs to sniff out anything that they could get you on. And the fact that the audio tapes and the things that don't match up, the next to nothing sentence that the confidential informant got. I mean, it was sort of like they gave him just enough to make it seem real that he really was, as according to him, out to save my life. They gave him just enough to make it believable by the main public. At the point I discovered it, foiled the FBI's plan, I don't think they could have just totally let him walk. But it's a huge discrepancy when he got really less than 2 years, and some of it was in a halfway house that I saw pictures of that were better than most hotels that I've stayed in. Also need to understand that the confidential informant, before all this happened, his house was in foreclosure. He was going bankrupt. To this day, he's still in that house and seems to be doing fairly well. Do I have proof? No, but I'll tell you, I know he's not very, I guess that's the good news, he's not very popular in our neighborhood. So I still blame him. He's part of it. He also had connections with the ATF and different people in the government, so it makes it really questionable that they couldn't, persuade him. But back to Jim Traficant. I want to say that he helped give me hope. I didn't get to know him as well as I would have liked to, but I live on the West Coast. Everybody here is on the East Coast. I don't get here very often. I do thank AFP for bringing me and giving me the opportunity to speak. But when Jim got up and spoke, it reminded me a lot of my husband because of the way he spoke. He had a way of bringing people in. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to stand up here and speak the truth when we know we're being fought all the time. So my biggest question is, now that we have lost people like my husband, and we've lost people like Jim Traficant, Willis Carter, who I am just disappointed not only in his death, but the fact that I was looking forward to finally getting to meet him, because he was really only a name and a figure to me. Michael Colin Piper. I'm sure there's others that are I'm missing. There are others that are going through the same thing that my husband went through. There's a guy spending he got 43 years. Set up basically the same way, but he was going to, he was hiring somebody to kill a federal judge. There is definite proof that he is innocent, but he got 43 years. They're still fighting for him. Frankly, I don't know if he's going to get free. There's another guy that's been going around trying to expose judicial corruption through a video. In fact, he interviewed me for the video. He fortunately was lucky. He just got the felony charges dropped. But why was he being targeted? Because he was trying to expose corruption. You know, I thank God that he got off, because as I well know, they don't all get off. I mean, they don't get out and get to prove their innocence. So I guess my biggest question is who? Who's going to step up? Who is going to carry on? How are we going to pull together and fight for what these men were willing to put their lives on the line for? You know, is it going to be me? Not alone, it's not. Is it going to be this group here? Well, it's a good start. I've heard a lot of good speakers and a lot of people that believe in our America. I do believe we need more. And the only thing that I'm encouraged about is at least they're not willing to speak up, but at least when I'm starting to talk to people at home, they're starting to see. They are starting to wake up. I mean, I want it to happen yesterday. So, you know, I really hope that we can keep going. We can at least begin to step in their shoes and continue to bring this country back to what we know it can be and should be. You know, when somebody passes away, you never get over it. Or at least you don't quite get over it. I'll never get over what they did to my husband, to me, and our kids. I'm slowly learning how to move forward and what that's going to mean. And I can tell you the one main thing that they can't take away from me is the truth. Our love was strong. He didn't do the crimes that they convicted on him because I know the truth. And I will stand by that. I also knew what he fought for. And I will always stand behind him. I stood by him when he was standing up, and I will still stand behind him. It's the same with Jim Traficant. You know, I can't say what happened to him, but like I've also said today, I don't put anything behind our government. I think they're capable of any atrocity that you can imagine. I want to see that changed. I want my granddaughters that are 7 and 2 to know what this country can be, what this country was founded on by our forefathers. That's what I want to get back to. And I hope we can do it all together. And thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you very much, Cindy. That was an excellent speech. According to our schedule, Chris Petherick, the executive editor, is supposed to be the next speaker. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. So we'll take a short 10-minute break, and we'll commence with the rest of the schedule.
Okay, we're good?
No, I just changed positions here. That's traffic.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the.
You want another one? You can have.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back. Well, speaking with a couple of people during the break, question was posed as to why more people don't speak up. Why is everyone, what's everyone afraid of?
Really?
Well, the title of a book written by a certain gentleman inside this room came to my mind, and the title is For Fear of the Jews.
Right.
But we have many people, maybe everyone in this room really, that has overcome that fear, and that's why we're here today. And Jim Traficant and Willis Carto and Edgar Steele were not afraid of the Jews. And that's why we know what we know, and that's why we understand what we do. Another person that's not afraid of the Jews is the next speaker. I met him at the same time that I met Jim Traficant at his Welcome Back conference in Youngstown. And we became friends right away. Since then, he has invited me to speak at his conferences, the Freedom Palooza conferences that he has held every year for 4 years. Although a lesser man would have been discouraged at the relatively low turnout, which was very disappointing considering all he offered. He put together 20 speakers and 20 bands over an entire weekend. Yet, a lot of people didn't show up, possibly for the reason that I just pointed out. Especially the year before, not this year, but the year before, several of the speakers didn't turn up because the Jews scared them. Because the ADL and the SPLC branded him a Holocaust denier, and as Jim Rizzoli will attest, that's when they come after you. But it didn't stop us from going there, it didn't stop Paul from having it, and it didn't stop Jim Traficant from coming there and supporting him even more so.
4 years in a row.
4 years in a row, that's right. So many of us here and most of the speakers attended those and were speakers there themselves. So Paul is a great patriot, and his band, Poker Face, has played for over a decade, maybe a couple of decades now, right? And he's been committed to his own, as Jim Rizzoli said, all of us need to do what we can do. Each one of us has his own talents, whether you can speak or write or do whatever. Well, Paul has gone more than most, and he has the talent of having his music, and he's used that music to get the message across, and he's a bright light in the Patriot movement. So I want to introduce Paul Tepay.
Good day, people. Where to start? It's nice to see a lot of the familiar faces here that have spoken, have come to the Freedom Palooza parties, but Freedom Palooza is something that's more recent in my activism than what it has been, I don't know, since I was like 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. The first words out of my mouth were bankers, Rothschilds and Rockefellers are bad, and I'd repeat what my mom would say in the front seat, and she'd like turn around and be like, shh, you don't talk about this to anybody because they'll think you're crazy. So that was my beginning, those were my roots, and really? I mean, the music out of the feedback mic. I'll get to Jim and where I came into our lives together, but I've traveled the world and I've seen how the other half live, and I know that being American, we're very blessed here, even though most people take their Americanism for granted. We keep being told that we're the greatest nation in the world, and America F yeah, and all that. But that's not why we're great. We're great because we're a nation that we're focused on faith, on our family, on our friends, and on our community. But we've since gone far away from that. It's all about me. I mean, look at the Kardashians. It's all about me. I mean, it's not about us as a community. It's what's about me. And that selfishness, that's something that's like a cancer in this country right now. We've stopped caring about our neighbors. We've stopped caring about our communities. We've become, boiled down to just a bunch of words that the Jew stream media, okay? It's not the lamestream, it's not the mainstream, it's the Jews media. We need our own media, and American Free Press is part of that beautiful new media. but we need more of it. We need, when something happens in the world, we need to have our response to it. We need to have our viewpoint spoken out there. Because right now, it's a bunch of our little websites that we have all over the place, and us spreading it amongst our like-minded people that our side gets out. But we need to have our own American, no-hyphen media, white media, Christian media, whatever you want to call it, but not the Jews media, because the Jews media is what's killing America, okay? So growing up, seeing the world in America through different eyes, and having two cultures to see the world through Mexican eyes and American eyes. My dad's Mexican, now he's American, but you know, I have half of my culture in the Mexican side, and I love Mexicans. I have a problem with 30 to 40 million illegals here, just as I would have a problem with 30 to 40 million gringos in Mexico illegally. Okay, we got to stop using the border as a porous, like if you have a pressure cooker. Our border is porous so that instead of us taking care of our own political problems within each of our own countries, Mexicans are flooding north instead of having their own social political revolution where they need to take back their own country from the Jew. Okay. I don't need my Mexican cousins and brothers up here, right? Being a fifth column, being used by the Jews so that I'm killing both American and Mexicans. Nah, it doesn't work for me. Okay, so the illegals need to go home. You need to take back your country. You want to come to this country? Come visit. Come with your papers, just like I do when I go to Mexico. I come with my papers. What made me take notice to Mr. Traficant when I was going through college, there's, out of the 535 or 45 prostitutes or prostitutions that are in government right now, there was two at that time that I took notice to, and that was Dr. Paul and Mr. Traficant. And unfortunately, I backed Dr. Paul for the 2007-2008 selection campaign, not knowing that he was not in it to win it, and he was only in it to take as many shekels away from us and give to his daughters and sons and granddaughters and so on and so forth, but not in it to win it. My candidate is actually seriously, when Mr. Paul was running, I wrote to his campaign early on and said, you really need to look at Mr. Traficant as your vice presidential candidate, because if you really want a strong ticket, the two of you on this ticket would blow away everything, because you have a Republican and you have a Democrat. Okay?
Right.
Did I hear back from the Paul campaign on that? I don't know, because Mr. Traficant was already, you know,
Right.
he got dirtied up because he's a free thinker and he told the truth, you know. But well, long before that, paid attention to Mr. Traficant. I loved his 1 minute, you know, speeches on the House floor, telling the truth. And when he started to get prosecuted for basically, you know, walking across the street, jaywalking crimes. I mean, our Congress critters do you know, duplicitous acts. They do a lot of malfeasance. They do a lot of dirty crimes, but they never get called on it. And here's Mr. Traficant getting called on. Somebody worked on his farm. Somebody did a couple things over here, and basically everybody that talked against Mr. Traficant had his arm twisted because none of them came there of their own volition. They all had indictments against them, like Mr. Glazer has pointed out. There was a lot of chicanery that was going on during that whole trial. As we know with Sister Cindy, same thing with her husband, okay? If it's you and the federal government, don't expect the truth to ever come out, okay? And I have a radio show that's been going on for the last 2 years. It's called Truth is the New Hate, because if you speak the truth, those that have agendas and sacred goats don't want that molested or disturbed. And if they're powerful, like they are, they're going to make you persona non grata. And as they've done to all of us in here, you know, I've also been called all the wonderful names. If they can't deal with me on an ideological level, they reduce me to a racist and an anti-Semitite and an Holocaust. Actually, am I in denial of the Holocaust? No, I talk about the Ukrainian Holocaust all the time. I never hear anything about that, or the 100 million Russians that died in the Jewish gulags, okay? And I keep telling my fellow Americans, it's like, if you want to see what would happen to America under Jewish, okay, ruling, we've already got a couple examples, all right? It doesn't end up very well for Whitey, okay? Especially Christian Whitey. And as long as I breathe, and I have a gun in my hand, and I have something to fight for, I'm going to continue fighting, okay? Because that's the American thing to do, all right? it's the right thing to do. It's the human thing to do. And which brings me back around to Mr. Traficant. Mr. Traficant's always been a doer. And even when he got charged with all those jaywalking crimes, I was just like, are you for real? And then I looked at like who was the main prosecutor behind him. Oh, Mr. Chertoff.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, so for the payoff of putting Traficant in jail, you got to be what? Homeland Security Director. And then you got to sell your $500,000 x-ray machines to all the airports across the country because of your phony war on scarism. Okay, that's great. So, Mr. Traficant went to jail. And like my band, my band Poker Face, we always come up with some great music. And we came with a song called Calling for Revolution. And we couldn't really think of like, how would we want to start off the song like Calling for Revolution? So you talked about the Phil Donahue. We scoured that hour-long tape too for just the right quotes, right? So we start off the Calling for Revolution with this. If we'll play.
Too many people in America fear their government, and the government is being run by too many powerful agencies like the IRS and others. I think it's time that people take the country back through their representative government.
Okay, so that was our fourth disc. That was one of the main songs on it. Ron Paul, Revolution. There's videos put out that use that song. But Mr. Traficant said it so eloquently throughout that whole video with Mr. Donahue. He just kept schooling Donahue. This is what Americanism is. And so we put that song out in 2003, and the whole time Jim was in jail. I tried to make contact with him, but like other people said, it's like he wasn't taking email, he wasn't taking anything. But I was in touch with a webmaster, female, that was actually in communication with him. And anytime that we had any kind of communication with him, it was just like, let Jimbo know that we love him out here. None of us believe the lies that were said about him. And just every year praying for him, praying that nothing would happen to him in jail, because a lot of times when you go to jail with the government, you don't come back out. Okay? And so we prayed for him, and then I believe it was the 6th of September 2009 was when that gathering was, and I was out there with Brother Pete. I sat at the same table as with Eustace Mullins, another great patriot that died in the last 5 years. And I don't know, man. It's like I've had a lot of great of my teachers, pass away in the last couple of years, and that's disheartening. But I see a lot of good youth coming up that have strength, and I still have some of my peers amongst me that are still here and kicking and giving all they got. So I went out to that, and I was recently divorced at the time, and I was all full of emotion, and I just want to congratulate the man that basically stood up, to the machine, stood up to the man, and took the lumps and came out still kicking and still strong. And it wasn't 1,500 people that were there, brother. It was 1,800 people. Okay. And I don't know if any of you folks have ever seen Bugs Bunny, but there's cartoons with Bugs Bunny, and anytime that they had like representations of the Italian mobsters, there was always like a big body and these little heads on top. And I always wondered, like, where did they ever get that cartoon characterization of big guineas like that? But I went to this welcome home thing for Jim, 1,800 people in this, but at every door there was one of those big Goomba guys, man. Big bodies, little heads, man. I'm like, these guys do exist. But they were there to make sure that there was no kosherites there that disrupted it, okay? Because they were all there for Jimbo, and there was a lot of love in that room for Jim. So I went to this, and Jim didn't know me from Adam, and I had my disc, and I gave it to him, and I said, like, look, man, you inspired one of the songs on this album, and I just want to know that you're my president, man.
Oh.
Well, he says, man, that's kind of heavy, Paul. Well, you're the only one that I trust in Congress, brother, okay?
There you go.
Right.
And this was after the Paul campaign and having, been bought into that, and just to have 30 to 40 million of our dollars taken away from us that we really didn't have to begin with.
Yeah.
And then he tried it again in 2012, and same result. But I was talking to Mr. Traficant. I was saying, thank you for standing up and, being the man that I've always looked up to you to be. He's your friend, he's your father, he's your brother, he's your grandfather, he's the man with charisma, if there was ever a man with charisma, okay? He could walk into a room and he could own it.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
If there's anything I want to learn is that from him, because he just exuded that. And So we stayed in touch, and I think at least 2/3 of the reason why I put together the Freedom Palooza festivals was basically for him. One, to let him know that he was loved, and two, to encourage him to be president. Because if there was anybody that was exuding our principles, it was him. Okay? And he could go on to any of the political talk shows and own it. Okay? And school the prostitutes that were trying to make him look bad. Like people like Greta Van Sestern and Insanity and Holmes and all those idiots, man. Come on. Insanity. Seriously. So I talked to Mr. Traficant before the first one in 2011. I said, look, Mr. Traficant, we'd like to make you the featured speaker. Will you come out and bless us? And with the help of American Free Press, we could force travel out to the party and back. And he came and spoke at the first one, and he was a hit. And he came out for the next 4. This past one was the first one that he missed at. Due to things out of his control. When we heard news that he had an accident, everybody that I knew,
No way.
Yeah.
it's like 2 people killed him. Either Mossad killed him or Hillary did, because anybody that's a threat to Hillary, like JFK Jr., okay, he got whacked.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And Hillary, I'm sure she said a chopped off head and put it in Joe Biden's bed and said, "You're not running, buddy, okay?" Hey, she's a murderous bitch, man. Come on. I don't know that. Let's call a spade for what it is.
Vince Foster.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah.
Way before Foster, man. He was just a Washington casualty, man. Let's go back to Arkansas days, man.
All
Okay.
right.
And see, that's the thing, is I have a long memory, man. I've been in this for so long that it's like I've seen things come and go and come back again, and it's just amazing. But it's interesting to see Jews with their predictive programming and the stuff going on with Trump right now, like how they had that back in, 2007 or something on The Simpsons, where they have Trump as president,
Oh.
or running for president, and then Hillary wins, or I mean, whatever the girl's name is on the show, Maggie, Lisa, yeah, Lisa. It's they always warn us what they're going to do to us. Okay, that's part of the Kabbalah, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, we can do all these bad things to you because we warned you. You know? 2001, we warned you lots of times. There's so much media that we're going to do something to you. You know?
Colin, check your phone. Look at your phone in your pocket. That's there. I don't know.
Nah. It's,
In the feedback.
Turn the bass on.
Yeah, just him.
Just him.
You got these weird vibes.
Gotta play with him.
Yeah.
you know what it is? It's my electromagnetic personality.
That's it. Yeah, that was my first guess.
You don't have a plate in your head, do you?
Stop the metal detectors everywhere. Oh.
You probably don't even need the mic anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's easy.
the coolest thing about Freedom Palooza,
That mic is following you.
yeah, seriously, man. The coolest thing about Freedom Palooza is it allowed Mr. Traficant, one, to know that he was loved. And when he would stay after the gigs, and the best part of the whole festival every night is the gathering around the fire. Because that's when you can just kick back, you can talk to people that think like you, talk like you, have things that you don't know about that, I didn't know that was going on, but did you check about this that I know that you know. So. And that's where Mr. Traficant was encouraged, and that's where he met Mr. Condit and some other folks that started talking about a plan for America, and he unveiled it at Freedom Palooza 4, and yeah, we're gearing up to help him, to encourage him to be the presidential candidate, and he would seriously be threatening Hillary right now, out of anybody. I mean, who's this bozo Bernie Sanders, this communist Jew?
Please.
I mean, it's sad when America's fallen so far that we're even looking at this communist Jew as a possible pretender for the presidency. My God. America's fallen far, man. And so it's one of the things that disheartened me the most right at the end was 2 weeks before he died, he called me and he asked me to be the Pennsylvania rep for his plan, and I said no because I got so much on my plate right now. Not that I didn't want to do it, but I wanted to do it if I had the time and the commitment that I could do it for him, and I couldn't because I got a lot on my plate. I have babies, I have parents, and that I'm taking care of, as my wife can attest to, and it's I couldn't do the job that he would need me to do, so I declined on it. And I was supposed to call him back, like the night before he passed away, and that I didn't get that last conversation with him. It just, you never know when the last conversation is with anybody. So I didn't leave off well with Mr. Traficant. I let him down, in my opinion, by not coming through for him. But I wish I'd had that last conversation, last time with the brother. And all I can say is, rest in peace, Brother Jim. I love you, man, and I wish you were here. Thank you. Yeah, say something, Dave.
Carol?
Okay. Great speech, Paul. Wonderful speech. Very well said from the heart. Right on. And it's going to be followed up by Paul's beautiful wife. Not only beautiful, but very talented, a great writer. She's written several articles for American Free Press, and also has been active in eco-friendly nutrition and other types of things. So here she is, Tara Tapetti.
Thank you, everybody. Well, what can I say? My husband doesn't look up to a lot of people. So when he says that, Tara, you're going to learn about Mr. Traficant because he is the John Wayne in our time, then I take that serious. So I went to Mr. Colin Piper's book, God rest his soul as well, and I read Traficant, and then I watched a few videos of his speeches on the Congress floor, and was amazed by how cool this representative was. I didn't realize that politicians could be so cool, and he really was. I was actually intimidated by him. I don't usually get, what do they call it, like starstruck with people, because I try to just keep cool. But someone like him, when he would come to Freedom Palooza and everyone would just be quiet and get silent and pull a chair up and listen to what he had to say, and he really grabbed everyone's attention in the room. And I don't know a lot of people like that. My husband has a way about taking control of a room, and I guess that makes sense that he would look up to him. So I have to say that Freedom Palooza, unfortunately, and honey, I don't mean to say anything bad, but I don't think it's going to be the same. But I'm really emotional and pregnant. So I just want to close by saying I've listened to Cindy's story many times, and it's never easy. And she's become a really good friend of mine, and every Freedom Palooza that she's come to, it just breaks my heart what they've done to her. It breaks my heart what they did to Jim, what they did to her husband. And it frightens me, and it really, as Joe would describe it, every now and then you get a flat tire, and it kind of puts a stop in your activism. And I guess I just want to say that we do have to continue on and be as fearless as we can be, because the truth depends on those of us who are strong enough and brave enough to speak it. And if there's anything that I think Jim would want us to do, is to continue to be brave and to speak about these things, and to keep working at it. And I'm going to write, and we're going to do videography classes, and we're going to do as much as we can to spread the truth and to get the youth involved. And it's not just the fluoride stuff or the food stuff, and we really do need to keep the focus on the real problem, and that is the Jews. And Traficant and Edgar Steele will put away because they weren't afraid to talk about those topics. So we need to keep strong and do those great, I guess you could say, the martyrs. Michael Collins Piper, Edgar Steele, Traficant, Eustace Mullins, all of those greats. We need to do them justice by continuing on, and I hope that everyone in here does that. And and help support the people who do if you don't do it for yourself. God rest Jim Traficant's soul, and thank you so much for hearing me, and I wish you all well, and carry on.
Thank you, Tara. Okay, our next speaker is a AFP writer. He's our roving reporter, goes all over America and reports on a lot of different conferences and events that take place. Very established journalist for many years, and a friend of Jim's. He had, I think you met Jim on the first conference we had here in 2010. I think I have a picture somewhere giving you a knuckle rub on your head somewhere. Like
It left a mark.
And you worked with him as I did, and you know, at the Project Freedom USA, and helping him develop some of his ideas and all that. Not that he needed us, but well, it didn't hurt. And you were, I think, supposed to be an integral part of Project Freedom USA, which I assume Jim Condon is going to talk more about later. So here he is, the one and only Mark Anderson.
We'll see how this works. Almost sounded like the 60 cycle hum that we musicians know all about. But you know, I'll kind of give the abridged version. I'm one of those speakers that does use a script. It does happen. Anyway, you know, I'll fast forward to something that's later in my relatively brief speech, and there's that hum. But one of the things that gets kind of lost in the shuffle of Project Freedom USA is when Jim Traficant did come to one of the 6 Bilderberg meetings I've covered. And he spoke, and Pete was there, on the grounds of the Grove Hotel as these nasty Bilderbergers met in this castle on the hill. And Jim spoke to the crowd there about something else besides Project Freedom USA, and that was the idea of finding out what Bilderberg is doing in terms of their funding. Did any U.S. government funding ever go into Bilderberg? And I'll just briefly mention, now that I've taken over for another loss we had, Jim Tucker, let's not forget Jim Tucker. Now that I've taken over for him, I'm also taken over for Traficant in the same vein, because Jim wanted to know where Bilderberg got its funding. And I'm happy to report on behalf of Jim Tucker and Traficant that a couple of things that have been in American Free Press in the last half year or so have made strides. Some of you may recall the stories that I happened to get. One was more details on the American Friends of Bilderberg. Who remembers those stories? Well, the story poked into the fact that the Bilderbergers do some funding of their own, and the American clique that's part of the Bilderberg Steering Committee, that's where they get some of their money. They put up seed money. And then another part of it was a more recent story that I had in American Free Press, where Richard J. Aldrich, let me get that straight, a British academic, an objective one I believe, established that CIA funding was behind the very first Bilderberg meeting. So I'm happy to report that I've made some strides for both Jims, both big Jims, Tucker and Traficant. And so we're going to continue that, particularly me and my Bilderberg work, not just whatever might be left of Project Freedom USA, but the more forgotten pursuits that Traficant had about Bilderberg. So that is continuing, I'm assuring you, on nailing down their seed funding and the American Friends for Bilderberg, looking at their tax returns, which I've done, and other avenues that Jim Traficant spoke about on the grounds of the Bilderberg 2013 meeting in the UK. So that's continuing. Now, I'll just share, I literally write speeches always at the last minute, and I'll kind of abridge this down, but we're here to remember Willis Cardo, too, as well as Jim Traficant, and with Cardo's passing, of course, having happened as an unexpected and, needless to say, unwelcome new development, to say the least. And Tucker, as I've mentioned, and longtime AFP writer, author Mike Piper are also on our minds, not just Mr. Traficant. And yet, while we finally remember all these men, including Edgar Steele, he's been brought to our attention too, remembering him, I want to direct my remarks to Willis here, to kind of focus on him for the rest of today's program. He and I did spend a lot of time walking to and from his apartment that he used to have on Duddington Avenue or Duddington Road near here. And we talked about a lot of things. We talked about a lot of funny things. He recalled that the first time I stayed at the apartment, he said to me, "You weren't in the Army, were you, Mark?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he had expected to find the bed in his apartment made to Army standards where you could bounce a quarter off the top.
That's right.
And I said, "No, I'm a bit more bohemian than that." And so we had a lot of light moments. It wasn't always heavy politics and whatnot. And Mr. Traficant, he liked to say, and you could fill in your name on this, he liked to say, "You're out of control, Anderson. You're out of control." And he would say, "You're out of control, Topetti, I'm sure," or "You're out of control, Papa Heracles." But that was one of his sayings that he would say at restaurants. You know, "They're going to come after you. You're out of control." And so we can remember the lighter moments, not just the court hearings and the nasty stuff. And another thing that, Willis had a lot of distinguishing characteristics. He knew Taylor Caldwell. Who remembers the novelist Taylor Caldwell? He knew her. And I've been an admirer. My mother gave me every Taylor Caldwell book there is known to man. Matter of fact, my favorite is The Captains and the Kings, which is a great book. And I had always told Willis that I want to write a compilation of Taylor Caldwell's work, so that in his memory, I'm starting to work on that. I started on the train on the way here, because she's a forgotten hero or heroine that wrote in her novel form, mixing in fact with fiction. She wrote about the growing establishment that was trying to overturn freedom throughout the world. And of course, this book is a fictional account of an upstart Irish patriarch who manages to claw his way up the power ladder and put his son in high office. And this novel is said to be patterned after the Kennedy family. That's what Taylor Caldwell said. And Willis would tell me that he had lunch with Taylor Caldwell and what a proud and tough-minded lady she was. And that's just unique. I was so glad to hear that somebody had met this great woman. And that's a distinguishing thing about Willis Carto. And Caldwell, as Willis would no doubt agree, she wrote in the foreword to this novel, quote, "This is probably the last hour for mankind as a rational species before it becomes the slave of a planned society," end quote. And no doubt Willis would agree with that. So I'm going to work on a biography of her, kind of a compilation of her work. And she stressed in her novels and in her nonfiction writing that war was a planned enterprise to enrich the powerful few. And likewise, Willis learned in his World War II service and in his subsequent career, it taught him that, as Smedley Butler said, war is indeed a racket. And then something that I had in the back of my mind that I had written down thinking that Willis would be here today, not thinking that he would pass away. I've been thinking about a late senator, and this popped up on Henry Macko's website just recently. And no doubt Willis would want to hear this if he were here today. This senator was Senator Homer Capehart of Indiana. Does that ring a bell with anyone? He found that the aftermath of World War II proves that the war was about killing Christians all along, not Jews. Senator Capehart said in a speech before the U.S. Senate, and take note when this happened, February 5th, 1946. Imagine how strong the emotions still were in America about that war and our rightness in that involvement. He said, quote, it is the deliberate policy of a confidential and conspiratorial clique within the policymaking circles of this government to draw and quarter a nation now reduced to abject misery." He was talking about Germany. And Capehart went on. I could get into a lot of different things, but just to give you the abridged version, here's some excerpts from Senator Capehart's February 5th, 1946 speech before the U.S. Senate. He served in the Senate from 1945 to 1963. And he made these remarks, therefore, as a freshman senator, so that even that takes courage to be a freshman and say things like I'm about to share. Senator Capehart of Indiana told his colleagues, quote, and he's talking about the misery visited upon Germany. Since the end of the war, about 3 million people, mostly women and children and overage men, have been killed in Eastern Germany and Southeastern Europe, and about 15 million people have been deported or had to flee their homesteads or are on the road. About 25% of these people, over 3 million, have perished. About 4 million men and women have been deported to Russia as slaves. It seems that the elimination of the German population of Eastern Europe, at least 15 million people, was planned in accordance with decisions made at Yalta. And Senator Capehart went on to say, Churchill had said, don't mind the 5 or more million Germans, Stalin will see to them. You will have no trouble with them. They will cease to exist. This is what Churchill was quoted as saying. And Senator Capehart went on, okay, I already shared that quote. Well, he went on, in this process, this conspiratorial clique, like a pack of hyenas struggling over the bloody entrails of a corpse, and inspired by a sadistic and fanatical hatred, are determined to destroy the German nation and the German people, no matter what the consequences. And this is in 1945. I mean, you know, this isn't later on when we've had time to do revisionist studies and all that. At Potsdam, the representatives of the US, the UK, and the Soviet Union solemnly signed the following Declaration of Principles and Purposes, quote, it is not the intention of the Allies to destroy or enslave the German people, they tried to claim. Mr. President, the senator went on to address in the Senate on the floor, the cynical and savage repudiation of these solemn declarations, the Potsdam thing I just referenced, which has resulted in such a major catastrophe cannot be explained in terms of ignorance or incompetence. This repudiation, not only of the Potsdam Declaration, but also of every law of God and men, has been deliberately engineered with such a malevolent cunning and with such diabolical skill that the American people themselves have been caught in an international death trap. Those are strong words for right at the end of the war. And moving on, I could share a little more. I'm kind of looking for the sort of the best quotes to sum up the senator's comments with. This is a good one here. Those who've been responsible for this deliberate destruction of the German state and this criminal mass starvation of the German people have been so zealous in their hatred that all other interests and concerns have been subordinated to this one obsession of revenge. So these are some of the things that I had planned on sharing with Willis had he been here, so I'm sharing them in his passing, hoping he's kind of looking on. But this Senator Capehart obviously had it right early on that the destruction of Germany was a major part of World War II, despite all the propaganda we've been fed. Now, I could go on, but I think that summarizes pretty well what this senator had to say, and it's pretty interesting he was able to make that much sense of it right after the war. But just to give some miscellaneous here as we wind up my speech in today's program, I can't help but mentioning who saw, I'm sure a lot of you have, but who read and saw the New York Times obituary to Willis? This has got to be one of the most hateful diatribes I've read about anyone, anywhere, ever. There is not one word of even neutrality in here. I mean, even the call-out quote, a recluse called the mastermind of the hate network. Even in the call-out quote. And of course, the headline screams, Willis Carto, 89, activist for far right, which would have been enough. I think that's where the Washington Post left off. But then they had, who said the Holocaust was a hoax? Oh my God. And so right away, almost right away, after I got done kind of swearing a bit, I wrote, I haven't gotten a reply yet, but I did send a letter to the writer Douglas Martin. You know, these New York Times writers, if I punch my own name up, Mark Anderson, maybe photos or something, it'll show my picture on the internet. You can find pictures of about any AFP writer. You try and look up these New York Times writers and they're like anonymous. Unless it's somebody really well known. there aren't even pictures of them hardly online. They're like these shadow writers. And I think they manufacture them in a lab somewhere. But I did shoot off a letter. I haven't gotten a reply yet. It was a fairly recently sent letter. And I'll share you what I sent to Mr. Martin, Douglas Martin, and replying to his poison pen. I put, Mr. Martin, your obituary on Willis Carto was quite unfair and a highly vitriolic diatribe. I worked with him at AFP, and I wonder why you didn't contact anyone at the newspaper for comment. Willis demanded truth, however much you might disagree with him, and he hated war. Yeah, he was a disciple of hate. He hated war. And he was troubled by events such as the merciless and unforgiving bombing of Dresden by the Allies. And the Allies did not always wear the white hats. Mr. Carto, above all, wanted peace. And he also served in the military, which I believe your obituary overlooked. But he knew soon thereafter that war is a racket, as Smedley Butler often said. Willis's views against military interventionism have been vindicated, as the U.S. is now helplessly at war nonstop 365 days a year, 10 days a week. It's very easy to curse the dead, Mr. Martin, and I've always understood that those who always accuse others of hate have hate issues of their own. Signed AFP writer M. Anderson. I decided to be a little shadowy myself. Oh no, M. Anderson, who's that? So we'll see, if we get a reply, we'll put it in the paper. I think we can all agree on that. I don't think I will. I think that a lot of us could consider writing to the Times and the Post to lambaste them for these really unfair and completely unobjective, hateful obituaries, particularly the Times. We can all think about that. You know, should we? I think we should all write them and, you know, give them a little piece of our mind. I'll kind of part with that. But let's figure out ways to, as Merlin Miller said today and others, let's figure out ways to team up. Let's not be so fragmented in what we do. And that's a way of facing the future and making AFP stronger and more widely read, despite all these losses. Mr. Tucker, Mr. Traficant, Mr. Piper, Mr. Carto, Edgar Steele. It's almost hard to take in. It's very hard to take in fact. And so I assume there's another newsroom in the sky and they're watching to see what we do, all the men I just listed. So let's not let them down, okay? So thanks for listening. So ends the abridged version.
Thank you, Mark. I didn't want to start out by saying a whole lot about Willis Carto, although I mentioned the tragic loss of his death. Because this was about trafficking and he deserved to have his own conference. However, well, I consider myself blessed in having been very good friends with Jim Traficant and very good friends with Willis Carto. That's something that has marked my life forever for the best. And I can't think of anything greater that I've done in my life than having been friends with both of them and learned a lot from them. So we've said a lot about Jim Traficant, and it was all deserved, and we could never do him justice for all that he has done for our country. But if anyone perhaps did more than he did, it's been Willis Carto. Although Jim maybe reached a wider audience on account that he was a congressman and got the TV coverage and all that, no one has influenced the truth movement more than Willis Carto.
Yeah.
We take individual people like all the revisionists, Eustace Mullins, we take even Jim Traficant, and we see them as great in themselves. But all of them were great because Willis Carto created a forum for them to be able to reach everyone. He was he was, as some people have named him, the godfather of the American right. I would say the godfather of the truth movement. So, we want to spend the rest of the program here in closing up in honoring Willis Carto and present awards, of course. And the one that's going to present these awards will be Paul Angel, who is arguably the biggest asset of American Free Press. He puts everything together. On the most part.
You left off the ET the other day.
His recent masterpiece has been the book that he put together of Jim Traficant, but almost all the books that you read from American Free Press and the Barnes Review, Paul has put them together. And when you read the American Free Press, although Paul doesn't get all the credit, if Paul doesn't put it together, it just doesn't get done. That's how it is. So give this man a huge round of applause.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for coming. Hey, listen, we have had a lot of loss. I just want everybody to know that I'm still alive, and that is a good thing. And you know, when I was putting this program together last night after everybody abandoned me, leaving me with this information, I came across that Mencken quote, and I thought of Jim and Willis when I saw it. The most dangerous man to any government is the man who is able to think things out for himself without regard to the prevailing superstitions and taboos. Almost inevitably, he comes to the conclusion that the government he lives under is dishonest, insane, and intolerable. I think that Jim and Willis both understood that and tried to pass that knowledge on to as many people as they possibly could. And of course, I did get a little emotional when I was thinking about that, but hold on. No, I'm not pregnant. That's good. Sorry, Tara. Well, listen, Mrs. Carto has come a long way because to be here because I had an award planned for Willis, and I bought it before. Pete, I have him in the corner. Yeah. I had planned a little award for him. It was a Lifetime Achievement Award. Willis hated public awards. He hated the spotlight, the literal spotlight, not the publication. And bring me this clock, would you? And so when I went to the award, it's the clock. When I went to get the award, I saw this clock and I thought to myself, this clock is going to stop working before Willis Carto is going to stop working. And then we got the bad news. Well, Mrs. Carto has come out here to see this. This is a Lifetime Achievement Award, and Willis would have been extremely embarrassed, which was what I was really looking forward to. For his 7 decades of service, we're talking 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010, through 2015. He was integrally involved in every aspect of American Free Press. He could run up and down the stairs faster than I could get up and down the stairs. He thought faster than I did. He was constantly working on ways to get new subscribers, to bring younger people in, to keep the people that were still involved in American Free Press happy with the publication, to do polls and everything else. He was integrally involved in the Barnes Review. He was probably the man most singly responsible for starting and maintaining the Holocaust revisionist movement, and many of the publications that are out there today, he had a hand in. We may not be involved in them now, but it would be nothing without what he did. And Willis, here it is, right here. Hopefully you can see that and you're not too embarrassed. Now, Mrs. Carto, you do not want to come up here now, do you? No. She's still grieving. I'm so glad that you made it out here. Very good. Listen, thank you, Willis. Thanks for employing me for all these years. Thanks for teaching me just about everything I know. This is for you. But we are here for Jim Traficant as well. And, you know, poor old Jim. He had a tragic flaw, and we all know it. We've discussed it already. It was just a horrible thing personality. Something must have been dropped on his head when he was a baby, I'm not sure. And this particular personality trait will get you to heaven, but it ain't getting you anywhere in Washington, D.C. And you know what it is. He told the truth, and he kept on trying to tell the truth, and he refused to stop telling the truth. And so we decided, well, how can we honor Jim, but for the next generation? And so, excuse me, it's the black. Yeah, my mistake. So we've come up with, this will be the first annual Jim Traficant Truth in Journalism Award. And I couldn't think of anybody better to give it to than the man who was just up here on the podium, Mark Anderson. Are you in the room, Mark? No, I didn't ask you to come up here and steal my thunder. No, I'm just kidding. Come on up here. Mark's been with American Free Press since we started. A lot of people think they can be journalists, like they think they can be advertising salespeople. Okay, fine. Some people can do it for a week. Some people can do it for a month, but very few people can do it week after week, story after story, grueling trip after grueling trip, year after year. 14 years he's been writing at least 2 or 3 stories a week. I could probably put a book of yours together that would approach 800 or 900 pages. So here it is, dedicated to Jim, with Mark being our first recipient. Jim Traficant Truth in Journalism Award. I know that Jim, Mark, you want to say a few words? Just a few.
Totally unrigged and unexpected. I'll start with those words. I mean, Paul, thanks a lot, and Pete, and whoever made this decision. You know, this ties into me carrying forth Jim's torch on the Bilderberg funding. I'm just really happy to have received it and beyond honored. So thanks again, anybody and everybody who had a hand in making this decision. Thanks.
I picked his name out of a hat. Now listen, our next award is going to come as a surprise to the recipient, but this guy is an up-and-comer. He's got a great reputation. He's a West Point graduate, so that might give it away. He is highly respected in our movement. He is level-headed. He is well-liked. He is a go-getter. He has started a political party. He has started an organization. He's written a book. He has worked with multiple political parties. He goes across the political spectrum, okay, and tries to work with everybody, which is what we need in this, is to stop squabbling amongst ourselves and work with whoever we can to go in the right direction. As you all know in life, we have 2 choices when adversity hits. I've heard it all from everybody here. We either give up or we keep moving forward. Merlin Miller recently, come on up here, Merlin. Merlin recently went to Moscow. Why he went to Moscow to see those warmongering Russians, I have no idea. But tell me, were they as bad as they say?
Wonderful people. I felt like I was back in America back in the 50s and 60s.
So in his efforts to bring truth here about the Russian people and to stop this mainstream slander, I figured we'd come up with an award for you. This is the Global Peace Award for your efforts to not only unify the Patriot movement here, but also to go out and find out what's happening overseas and see if what the mainstream media is telling us is the truth. We know it's not. Pete, why don't you?
Oh my God.
Pull it right out of
This is a beautiful award. I don't even want to touch it and ruin it.
Don't worry, the ADL already has your fingerprints.
Thank you so much. This is totally unexpected, and I'm just so taken by it, and I don't know what we can do to bring peace to the world, but we got to try. And it starts here. It's all about unity, and these are great people here. We've got to get our own think tanks. We've got to unite in so many different ways. But thank you. I think I'll honor that.
I know that Willis had great admiration for you, Merlin, and that particular Peace Award I would have renamed it had I known, because Willis worked tirelessly to expose the horrors of war. Unless you've been to war, I don't think you'd know it. He had been. And I think that we're going to carry on that work there to keep on hammering home that these wars that we're in are a complete waste, not only of money, but of blood, life, and all the great people that are getting killed here. And it's just a tragedy. So that next year might be the Willis A. Carto Global Peace Award. I have one more for an up-and-coming journalist, a man who's under 50. I can't believe it, in our organization. Okay, this guy has already suffered enough at age 29. Bring that over to me, would you? This is from the Foundation to Defend the First Amendment. It's the Free Speech Award. John Friend, come on up here. Now, John has already been fired twice. I've been fired 4 or 5 times, but never for free speech. We'd like to present you with this for, suffering from what you've already suffered. The attack on you by the San Diego, was it San Jose? San Diego Union Tribune. John had maintained his own blog in which he had the audacity to place his actual opinions on there, but somehow, in 2 instances now, people have searched him out, exposed him for his political incorrectness, and he's been fired. Not one of those times have his employers had any problem with his work performance, just the opposite, right? So I think right now at your age to have been fired twice for freedom of speech is a real badge of honor. I don't think you can wear this on your lapel, but here it is. That's from the Foundation to Defend the First Amendment.
Well, it's kind of funny. It was actually exactly 2 months ago today, I think. I was contacted by a reporter for the San Diego Union Tribune, and he had been tipped off to my website. And of course, I was trying to find out who in fact tipped him off. I'm still researching that, see if I can get to the bottom of it. But he wanted to interview me. He wanted to write a story about it. I went into work the very next day, and of course, I was immediately fired. So I ended up talking to this reporter. He ended up writing an article about it the very next day. And if you read the article, if you just Google John Friend, San Diego Union Tribune, it actually portrays me in a very positive light. It says I was very well liked in the office. I did not bring my politics into the office. Of course, it called me an anti-Semite and a white supremacist. But if you actually look at the definition, or what the word anti-Semite really means, it's somebody who states basic facts about Jews and Jewish power and influence in this country and around the world. So I'm actually a proud anti-Semite. And then, of course, I was denounced as a white supremacist. And again, if you look at how that word is actually used in our modern discourse, being called a white supremacist is simply somebody who recognizes that they are a white person and they have unique political interests that are most certainly not being championed by anybody, certainly in the mainstream. So again, I'm a proud white supremacist too. So.
I am not an anti-Semite. I have nothing against Arabs. Listen, we have lost a lot of people recently. But this is a war. This is a battle. Okay, these people put a lot of time and energy into their careers. I'm talking between the people we've talked about, literally 200 years between them all. Could it be 250? Jim Tucker was in this for 50 years. Willis was in this for 60 years. Mike Piper was in this since he was 25 years old. Edgar was in it for decades, okay? We have to carry on, and that's what we're going to do. As I said, you have 2 choices: give up or keep moving forward.
70 years for Willis.
70 years
55
since he was.
2015, 70 years.
No kidding. Wow, you got a long way to go, Pete. Yes, we'll have to have an award for your walker when that happens. But anyway, I really thank everybody for coming here. You're the reason we do this. Continue to support American Free Press and the Barnes Review and any other independent news media that you can find or like. I think we've got a long way to go here. It's going to be a tough battle. I'm 55 now. I've been doing this myself for, I think, since I was 30. I worked with Willis for 25 years. And it was trying at times because of the financial situations we had, the things that we all went through together. But we're still standing, and we're going to keep on going forward. So Mr. Rizzoli has had great comments, Mr. Glazer here, and all the rest, and Cindy. Think of the things that these people have been through. John Friend at his young age. You know, what I've been through is next to nothing, okay? Besides working with Pete a little too long, but I mean, really, there's bigger battles ahead, and so we're ready for it. I just want everybody to know Just because people pass away, it doesn't mean that the work that they pioneered isn't going to be carried on by others. We're here, we're ready, we got the torch, we're moving forward. Thank you.
Paul, excellent, excellent speech. And Paul is probably the most modest guy in the world. In my estimation, Paul is a genius. I don't just say this because he's here, but this guy can write, he can speak, he can word process, he can put everything together. He's the most unsung hero, and he deserves a really, really warm applause.
Yeah.
Please. Okay, what do we have left in the schedule here? Okay. The next speaker is somebody that's been a political activist for decades and decades. He's run for office, I don't even know how many times. I don't know if he really expects to win, but the fact that he does run, he gets an opportunity to get our message out there and get
Did you want to do the tribute to Willis first? That's be
well,
on the program. I don't care how you do it, but that's on the program. The tribute is before me, but go ahead.
yeah. In any case, so Jim Condit is one of the bigger forces in American, well, right-wing politics or the truth movement, you could say. And he is brilliant. He knows so many things about how the system works, the election process, names, dates, people. He's a wealth of information. And a great guy. And he has also been instrumental in helping me put this conference together as far as getting even this schedule. That's why he was caught me on going off a sequence here. But in any case, give a warm hand, a warm applause to Jim Condit Jr.
That was too kind, Pete. Pete is also someone I've learned a lot from. And you know, you've been in this a while, you think you know. You can't learn anything new, but sometimes, but because you heard the same thing over and over again. But Pete has taught me a lot. Okay, I'm going to give a tribute to Jim Traficant. I traveled with him his last 5 or 6 trips. These are like 10 or 12-hour drives, Freedom Palooza and down to Freedom Law School. And so some of you, if you've been at Freedom Palooza, you may have heard a few of these things before. I don't think any of you will have heard all of them, but I'm doing this partly for the YouTube that Vinny's making, because you never know if a young person happens across it, and I'm going to try to give a feel for Traficant. First with some anecdotes. Traficant's in college, right? He's the University of Pitt quarterback, and he told me this story when we were driving, that against Navy in, I think, 1962, big rivalry they kind of had built up, and Mike Ditka's there, the famous guy, the famous football guy, lionized by the Chicago Bears in Saturday Night Live, and Traficant, the last play of the game, and they're tied, and they need, so Traficant calls a play, and he calls it in such a way that nobody recognizes exactly, because Traficant had something up his sleeve. Now he's the quarterback. Ditka says, "Hey Jim, that's not," and Traficant told me he turned to Ditka real quick and said, "Shut the heck up, Jim," or Mike, excuse me, "Shut the heck up, Mike." Now that wasn't the exact sentence he told me, but it was close. It was the same amount of syllables. And so they hiked it to Jim. Everybody was looking for a fumble. While they were doing that, he mixed up Traficant, ran around and for the touchdown and won the game. Okay, that's one story on Traficant. Okay, when I did the radio show with him in May 4th of 2014, I guess. Last major radio show he did, I would run for office and rent the 2-hour program on WKRC, which is a 50,000 watt channel. And as we're getting ready, I was kind of like I am now. I'm trying to think, do I get all my notes here? Blah, blah, blah. So we're getting ready to go on, and Traficant says, "Hey, we're going to get the message out, but let's have some fun." That was Traficant. He always wanted to have some fun. And he got it out and he had some fun. Well, while we're there, I go down, Traficant says, go check where the bathroom is in case during the show one of us, we have to go. And I said, yeah, we can cover for each other. Well, luckily that didn't happen. But I'm going down the hall and a guy, I said, do you know where's the red? And he tells me, and I said, but your voice is familiar. Are you Chuck Van Zandt, the WLW's news guy and weather guy? He says, yeah. He says, your voice sounds a little familiar because I had all these ads with Traficant leading up to this show. He said, you did the ads with Jim Traficant, didn't you? He said, I love Jim Traficant. I said, well, would you like to meet him? He's right down the hall. He says, you're kidding. He's a big guy, so he comes down. Now, another person's in the building that night because Clear Channel has 28 radio stations and a lot of things are going on. It's a tremendous operation technologically. And this person is about as famous as Matt Drudge. I'm not going to say his name. I don't want to ruin his career. Maybe he's a little more famous than Matt Drudge. And he's walking past, because he's on one of the shows getting a coffee. He hears Traficant's voice. I just see him turning around. He comes in, he says, Jim Traficant. And I could tell this guy who you might recognize, and he's a neocon, but I could tell he really liked Traficant, like a lot of other people I saw. They're not supposed to like him in public. And they talked for a while. And that was kind of an interesting thing. And Traficant said, when he left, he said, these guys, he said, I think a lot of them like me, but they got to watch who they put on their show if they want to keep their career. Okay, now you saw in the video that Jim Rizzoli put together that there's a picture there of me in a headlock with Traficant. That was the second last picture taken of him in a public venue. The last was in his last speech, which appeared in the American Free Press. Well, my sister Jennifer, who's kind of a political activist and kind of impish, we get up before budget, we're renting a car. She says, wait a minute, we got to take a Jimmy picture, because Jim Traficant and me. So she's getting her camera out, and he gets me in that headlock. Now, I never thought I would be in one of those. He got a lot of people. She snapped the picture. Now, I didn't tell you that just to tell you something about me. I'm listening to Sean Hannity, and this is hit or miss. Sometimes I think God wants me to hear these things just to have a story to tell you. But Sean Hannity's talking to Jamie Dupree, who's one of his experts, and as far as establishment goes, he's well connected, So Sherrod Brown had criticized Obama or Hillary that day, and Sean Hannity says to Dupree, do you think that Sherrod Brown could be the next Jim Traficant from Ohio, the late Jim Traficant, the character from Ohio? And Jamie Dupree says, there'll never be another Jim Traficant again. He said, Jim Traficant is the only guy that has put me in a headlock and walked me across the Capitol building. He apparently put Dupree in a headlock as they walked underneath that dome that now looks like it's a beehive down there today. So anyway, now another one, Fox News. I don't watch the 5 every day, but I have the TV on sometime when I'm working. The 5 on Fox, this is about 3-4 weeks ago. Tucker Carlson's hosting. I kid you not, I couldn't believe it. So the question was, who's the most remarkable person you've ever met? Somebody else asked it. And Geraldo was on. Geraldo Rivera said, who? I don't know, Frank Sinatra, Elvis. And then they looked at Dana Perina, who was a press secretary for George Bush, and she was quiet. And they said, you want to say George W. Bush, don't you? She said, yeah. So I don't have time to psychoanalyze how a good girl from Montana thinks that that's the most impressive person she ever met. But then Tucker Carlson says, the most impressive person I ever met is the late congressman from Youngstown, Ohio, Jim Traficant. I couldn't believe it. And Tucker Carlson's covered a lot of campaigns. And so he then, Greg Gutfeld, who's one of the clever people on that show, said, yeah, his name shouldn't have been Traficant, it should have been Traficant, right? And everybody laughed. And I can't remember who the other said, but I was astounded to see that come on. If they would have said why he was the most remarkable person, everyone there might have lost their job that day, so they didn't go any further. Okay, so another thing, Traficant was part Italian and part Romanian. We got some folks here, at least one that comes from Romania. I won't out our audience, and was recently in Romania. But Traficant was a story a minute. If you're around him, a story an hour. Every time you left him, you could tell more stories. He thought he might have been related to Count Dracula, Dragul. There was a real house in Dragul. He was researching that. Maybe he did have some of that blood in him, but he was serious. He was in prison. He was researching it. He said when he was younger, his grandma was from the old country. She was from Romania. And the old, you're not old enough, Tara, and some of you people remember this, but on Friday night, no cable, they would play black and white Frankenstein movies. Paul, you remember this? Black and white werewolf movies and black and white Dracula movies, like at 11:30. If you're lucky, you get to stay up and watch it and get scared. So he said when somebody say, hey, there's a Dracula movie on tonight, his grandmother would go, shh, do not mention his name. So he said there was still that fear of Dracula, who was a real guy and killed a lot of people, in the older people, even though he was 4 centuries ago. Okay, Traficant, first time he ever called me back, I met him thanks to Paul and Tara Tupetti at the Freedom Palooza. And first time he ever called me back after that, he called me, and I'm kind of like starstruck, you know. And I said, now should I call you Congressman? And he goes, come on. He said, Jim. I said, okay, I just thought I'd ask, you know, because I, like many of you, were kind of in awe of Traficant. He loved people. We were lost coming to this thing, the July 19th thing here. I get there, I'm expecting to sleep for 6 hours. Traficant says, we're leaving now. Oh, gosh. So anyway, we left, and we get here, and he thought he would remember D.C. Well, D.C.'s changed a lot. So we're lost, and he's saying, Jim, why didn't we stop and look at the directions? I said, Jim, I said 3 times we should stop. He said, anyway, so we finally get here taking a hairpin turn that would have killed us during rush hour traffic. And anyway, but we had to stop and ask directions, and there was maybe some Indians or some African Americans. But you could tell how Jim talked to everybody he met. He loved people. He loved people. And he'd say that, thank you, my brother, as he's leaving the 7-Eleven somewhere near here. So anyway, but he loved people. His grandchildren, I met them, I think became friends with his wife, Tish, and his grandchildren they loved him. They were about 7 or 8. He missed their birth. He was in prison. But they would call him Papa or Jimmy. His grandchildren called him Jimmy. Okay. So when he won the award, and they wrote about him as the most friendly person in Congress. And most people didn't like his politics, but they still, in one of these Washington magazines, said he was the friendliest person. The guy that wrote the article said, the Traficant was a gentle bully who wouldn't hurt a fly. In other words, when he told the reporters off, they probably felt intimidated. But he says he wouldn't hurt a fly, which was true. And he told the story how Traficant once saw him and 4 other reporters near the congressional elevator, and he stopped and said, you didn't treat me right in that article, you should have done, you didn't quote me exactly right. Then he gets the ball in the mouth, and then he says, come on, you can ride the congressional elevator with me. So they all get in. He probably made friends with him along the way, and that's the way Traficant was. I have a brother-in-law who's a fireman, and he tells me, near when Traficant had the accident, he said, oh yeah, my uncle hunts with Traficant, and he's Traficant's best friend. I said, wait, he can't be his best friend because I know 4 or 5 other of his best friends. Everybody seemed to think they were the best friend of Traficant. Okay. But he was also tough. He told me a story about how a businessman in his district said, Congressman, I'm ashamed that I signed things with the IRS I shouldn't have. They intimidated me. Well, he went down to the IRS office with him. He walks in. I guess some of them knew he was anyway. If not, they were probably taken aback. And he says to the whole room, about like a room of this of people working in the IRS, he says, are any of these people the people that forced you to sign that? And the guy says no. So they start going around the offices, and then Traficant finally gets in a room, and he says, those are the 2 guys. So Traficant says, I'm going to be starting an investigation of this office intimidating constituents unless we sit down and talk. So he negotiated back to a fair deal with the IRS there. One time at the, Pete was in, and Dean Malone, he came to Cincinnati in September 2011. And so this is, again, I'm switching just how Traficant, different anecdotes. But so we're leaving. He spoke the night before. We went to my dad's office and argued about economics, and Dean Malone was telling me about social credit, which Mark Anderson studies, which we want to call American National Credit. And Traficant, we're getting ready to leave and go in different cars, and Traficant says, everybody, come here, like we're getting in a football huddle. And he says, P-I-P. And I said, what's P-I-P? He said, panic in private. Now, I'm sure if he panicked, it was always in private. I never saw Traficant panic in public. So anyway, now, charisma. I met him in 1988. Willis Carto put on a populist convention in Cincinnati. It was at the Holiday Inn. Bo Greitz was there. David Duke was there. Black was there. First name's escaping me at the moment. Don Black. Thank you. So anyway, I met him there, and he was the speaker. He was the keynote speaker, a Democratic congressman at the Populist Party, the spotlight. I couldn't believe it. But I was determined not to like him because Traficant, I knew, had voted with the Democrats on some big funding bills that included abortion funding. Okay, and my beginning of the movement was pro-life. So I was kind of determined that I wasn't going to like him, and Jim straightened that out before the end of his life. But he spoke, and he was so good. He spoke out Seabiscuit, and tremendous speech about how the little guy has to keep moving, and not always the favored winner wins. And I thought, until he went around then and shook the hand of everybody in the room, whoever said that, about 150 people, shook everybody's hand. And I said to myself as he left, I said, there are some people more charismatic than other people. He's only one of two men in my life that I say were the real alpha males. I mean, there's a lot of alpha males in here, but he was the real, the super alpha male. Jim Traficant, one other person, the only people I ever met that I would put in that category, because even if you didn't want to like him, you liked him, and he had that special charisma that's hard to put your finger on. Then I watched him at C-SPAN when he was being thrown out of Congress, and it was a tremendous performance by him. The other people should have all been paddled. Huh?
Y'all should have been jailed.
Jail. Yeah, probably they literally did. But they should all have been at least paddled. It was so bad, and Traficant's defending himself, and I'm sitting there thinking, I mean, I liked him because I knew about him through the AFP and Demonic and all that, but I'm saying to myself, what did he do? Somebody say what he did. Well, of course, now we know when there was the charges are so silly, they're ridiculous. Mike Piper, Target Traficant, wrote about. They're so bad. I mean, if they had anything on him, why didn't they bring the charges up when they had him in court? You know, and it's so ridiculous. And he was framed like Congressman Hansen was framed because he did things good for the country. I rode with Traficant, as I say, his last 6 or 7 trips. Freedom Law School in Florida, Freedom Palooza, July 4th and 5th of that year. About a few months before he had an accident. Now, Jim, another anecdote, he had a bad eye, and they were actually having to put a needle in his eye to try to fix it when he went to the doctor, so he couldn't drive in the light, dark, so I would drive in the dark, and then if it got light, he would drive in the light. Last public speech was down in Pulaski, Tennessee, and that was Jerry Cobb, who was in his 80s, brought him down there. And there was a reporter there who, now this was not filmed, his last public speech was not filmed, but there was a reporter there who had written a real terrible article about Traficant. Jerry Cobb stood up at the end of the meeting and said, there's the reporter, and that guy wrote a terrible article, and he probably kept our attendance down tonight, and blah, 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 blah. And Traficant, then you'd have to see this to fully appreciate it. He said, I forgive you. He said, you couldn't have known. With all the smears against me, you couldn't have known. And you could tell he really had come at peace, like Jesus said, to forgive people. So, and then the reporter was going up to interview him after the speech, and I could tell the reporter liked him, who had just wrote a terrible article about him. As I say, somehow I hooked up with Pete Papahercules. Pete really saw Jim's value, that he could, again, be a great leader in the country again. And then he was going to, I guess, Paul and Tara told me they were watching a video that I had put on, Gluttons for Punishment they must be, and they were looking for one more speaker, and Tara said, well, why don't we invite Jim Condit Jr., and Paul said, nah, no. He said, okay. So that's how I met Traficant, and I'll be eternally grateful for that, because I didn't want to call him. He doesn't know if you're a psycho, if you're a stalker. I wanted a natural introduction, and that provided it. 2013, we talked about it, the ADL and the SPLC attacked Paul Tapetti and the Freedom Palooza, and everybody canceled. The Oath Keepers guy canceled. Sheriff Mack canceled. Yeah. And so Traficant said he was going to stay home with his family. He had a July 4th with the family, but he came, and he said, I knew if I didn't come, it'd look like they won. But because he came, they did not win. Because Traficant was big. He was the biggest guy. He was bigger than all the other speakers put together, for sure. So, at any rate, now 60 Minutes. Now, you saw part of it on this thing that Jim Rizzoli put together, but a guy in the YouTube, he says, I was in a Goodwill store a number of years ago, and I saw an old VHS that said Traficant. That's where part of that came from. It's still on YouTube. If you can see it, because it's very good. It was 1991. And one thing he does is, as Pete mentioned, he's walking up to the Capitol with Morley Safer of CBS, who's one of the immediate tribe, if I can put it that way. By the way, I appreciate Paul Tapetti, because when he gets done speaking, he makes me look like a middle-of-the-roader, and I do appreciate that. So Jim's walking toward the Capitol, that we can see out the window, and he says, forget that congressman stuff. I'm the son of a truck driver. That's part of it. And then they show a picture of him in court when he's fighting the judge and they're about to put him in jail as sheriff, when he wouldn't foreclose on people's homes, or at least wouldn't kick them out quick if the bank hadn't negotiated. So his judge is up here, and he turns around, he's walking back to his table, and he says, I don't like to kick people out of their homes, Judge, because that means a family's losing their home. Now, where do you find a sheriff or any public official who really gives that much of anybody
That's right,
losing their
that's
phone? That's on that 60 Minutes tape. Morley Safer starts saying, yeah, but you were guilty because of this. And Traficant backs him down right there and says, I can't have done anything wrong if this happened. I can't remember now, but you can watch it. I couldn't have done anything wrong if that happened. And Morley Safer says, you're right. Now, I give Morley Safer credit because he included that in the final edit. He could have cut it out. So I think even Morley Safer was amazed that Traficant had turned the tables on him. Traficant was very quick, needless to say, you all know, very quick mind run-wise. Then at the end of the trial, he won in 1983. You know that trial where he beat the Irish, the only layman in history to beat the Irish. On this tape, at the end of the tape, the jurors are coming out of the courtroom, and everybody, all the jurors are hugging Traficant. They're all hugging. When have you ever seen one of the people, usually the jurors, when we all hate everybody that was in the trial, but these people are hugging Traficant. The judge said later after the trial, the judge was a woman judge, she said, I had chills going up and down my spine when Traficant gave his final summation. Jim told me that the mafia from New York City called him after that because they were so amazed that anybody beat. And they said, we'll send you to law school if you'll defend some of our people. And Jim said, obviously he didn't do it. I mean, he could have been set for the rest of it. He said, no, I can't do that. He didn't, I don't think he said for several reasons, but he said, no, I can't do that. So he was already a sheriff anyway. Okay, now we come to the pardon, and I'm going to repeat something I said and some of the other things, but when they came to Jim a year and a half into his, or whatever it was, a year into his prison, and W. Bush said, if you'll sign you're guilty, we'll let you out. Now, I hope I would do what Jim did and say, okay, I'm not going to do it because I didn't do anything wrong. I hope I would do that. But I don't think any of us knows for sure what we would do until we got to that moment. I have daughters. I walked down the aisle, recently, and Jim missed his only daughter's wedding. So I say to people, if you think this guy was some kind of a crook, even a little bit, how many crooks would not just say something? There's people that are guilty that will put somebody else in jail to get out of jail 4 years earlier. Right. I can name some of them, but I won't. We know we know what Traficant did. We don't have to wonder about him. We know what Traficant did. That's a big thing. We don't have to guess what Traficant did. He wouldn't sign because he didn't do anything wrong. He spent the next years in jail. And they did the same thing to Congressman Hansen for fighting the IRS, but not as bad. Also, if you cooperate with the establishment, Paul, you're worth $10 million by the time you leave. John Boehner, John Kasich, our disgraceful governor in Ohio, and John Boehner, who grew up 20 minutes from me, and he's not a conspirator, he just got sucked into it, and he acts like a conspirator, but he didn't go up there to do what he ended up doing and hurting America. But if Traficant had cooperated with the organized Jewish network, he would be worth $10 million today, and all that. So he was always struggling. For heaven's sakes, Charles Rangel has been convicted of a crime that he should be in prison for, and he's still in Congress. That's what happens if you cooperate with the establishment. And he's still sitting there in Congress. The judge's name in Traficant's case was Leslie Wells. She belongs in jail like most judges that have heard of political things. And Leslie Wells, Traficant told me that when the jurors were in favor, when they were going to show the jury that the Traficant was innocent, they would drop the charge. The judge dropped several charges and dismissed the jurors rather than have credible jurors appear. Okay, and then did you catch what Leo said about Grody? He says, I'm not convicted, and he's 22 years old. They could tell he wasn't going to be pushed around. Okay, his lady that raised him, his aunt, dies in a car wreck. Now, I don't have any proof of this. Could that have been an assassination? I would only rule it out. And then the judge says, no, you can go to the funeral. Then she dismisses him and brings in somebody who they know is, something. We haven't heard the end of that. Okay. They feared Traficant. On this 60 Minutes thing I mentioned, a guy who had originally been at odds with him, the guy named Haney, says if Jim Traficant goes into a hall with 10,000 blue-collar workers, when he leaves an hour later, 9,999 of them will be supporting Traficant. And that is why they feared him. He ran for president in 1988. Maybe you didn't know that because the media blocked him out, like they blocked out Eugene McCarthy, who ran in 1992. Billy Jack, I think Tom Laughlin was his name, the guy that played Billy Jack, ran for president in 1992. They just blocked these guys out when they want to. And they blocked Traficant out in 88. I said to Pete at one time, if Jim ran now or then for president and they gave him fair coverage and we have a fair count, he could have been president. And Pete said, you know he would have been president.
Right.
You know he would have been, because people responded to him and they could tell he was an honest guy who had their interest at heart. He was America's last minute man in many ways with those minute speeches, and Nas has books over here of the last minute men. His Beam Me Up videos, another reason they feared him. Now, I don't know if it was all the other congressmen put together or just more than any other congressman by far, but more of his 1-minute speeches were ordered from C-SPAN than any other congressman. It may have been, by far, it may have been in one period, all the congressmen put together. When Jim Collier, who wrote Vote Scam, of the stealing brain, he said, once they get the computers in, they can do anything as long as it's believable. Well, they couldn't even make it believable on Traficant. They could hardly get anybody to run against him. He was getting 90% of the vote, okay? So they have to make it believable. When they couldn't make it believable, they trumped up the charges and put him in prison. They weren't going to be able to ever beat him in that district and make it believable. Even when he lost in 2010, and I don't know if Jim totally understood or bought my vote fraud research and others, but I said, Jim, you lost 60-40. All they had to do was flip, I think it was 20,000 votes, and you won that election. I said, I think you probably won, because people like to vote for the bad guy against the teacher and that type of thing. And his friend up there, one of them said, I asked, all through that campaign, I asked people, and afterwards, who you voting for, who you vote for? He said, not one person said Ryan, everybody said Traficant. So I think they probably just stole that from him in a vote flip. He appeared on the media in 2009 when he got out of prison on Greta Van Susteren and Hannity. And you saw that here. We're going to see a video at the end that repeats some of that. But I've watched some of these videos, Pete, 30 and 40 times. So we won't mind seeing it again, some of it again. But after he appeared on that, and Chris Matthews and who's the other, Wolf Blitzer, he never appeared on the major media again. Who runs the media? I wonder if we could figure out who. Thank you, the Latvian. This is like, excuse me for an anecdote here, quick. One of the greatest actors in the history of Hollywood, Marlon Brando, you may not have seen this, he was on Larry King, in the old Larry King show. He took Larry King by the suspenders in the middle of an interview and said, the Jews run Hollywood, Larry! The Jews run Hollywood! I don't know if you ever heard of this, it's true. So the next day I'm watching the news and some Jewish producer comes on and says, he will never work again. Right. So I thought, thank you for just confirming what he said. Anyway, so, I think he did work again, but the idea was, we will never work again. So,
publicly apologized.
Yeah, he did. He did go through the, I can't go into that, but he did go through the tour, and Pat Buchanan made a very funny comment about that. But I got to keep going or I'm not going to get done on time here. Okay. He was about to launch Project Freedom USA on the internet a month before, after he had the tractor accident. He beat the IRS, 1997 again. He made it so they had to go to, as you know, had to go to court to get somebody's home. 1997, they took 10,580 Americans' homes without going to court. Traficant Amendment was put in. Clinton had to sign it in 1998. That year, they took 58 homes the next year. That alone is enough to get them to want to put a person in jail. Because, excuse me, but the IRS is the Talmud in action. In other words, the top Jews think, we own all the property, you're the animals, we deserve your property. Traficant stops them from taking 10,000 homes. Come on.
Yeah.
That's what that is, the Talmud in
Don't
action.
screw up the banker's money, man. That's what happens.
Exactly, and he said that other Congress would come to him in Congress and say, Jim, keep your head down, don't do anything else, they're going to get you. He said, you know, if they can get me, they can get you too.
He called him the screw supervisor.
Yeah, the screw supervisor, right. And Project Freedom USA was then the IRS and then the Fed, okay? And then I think it was Chris Petherick who suggested he should run against Hillary for this presidential campaign. I called Jim up one night, I said, because the people in Florida were saying this, his Project Freedom leaders were saying this in other places, and I called him up we were talking one night briefly, because Kevin was usually brief on the phone, and I said, Jim, I want to warn you now, some people are wanting you to run for president against Hillary in the Democratic Iowa caucus. And he said, they're crazy. He said, I couldn't even run for the city limits. But I believe that he was constrained. And if he had stayed alive and run, it's another speech, we would have got him in the public, forced him into the public through the reasonable access law. It would have been one of the most hilarious episodes in American political history, I guarantee you. So again, he beat him in the 1983 trial, he did. And then the Jumagne thing. Again, Jim is like, in these movies like Braveheart, the hero doesn't start out like Merlin was saying. They're reluctant heroes. They didn't try to come to Congress to do, but they get pulled into it. And Traficant was saying, I'll see the guy because nobody else will see him. And he ran into the buzzsaw. But what he did with Demonic, besides say on Good Morning America with, I think it was the Today Show with Brian Gumbel, besides saying if they convicted on that right before he was in Israel, right before they were going to make the decision, said if they hang an innocent man, Israel could lose its $25 billion in aid a year. And Brian Gumbel said it's $3 billion. He said, well, you're not counting this, and you're not counting the military, you're not counting it. So who would say that? You know, very few people would ever say anything like that on national media that have been in the public eye. And then you have this fact that really when Demonic was acquitted, that threw a shadow of doubt over all the rest of their prosecutions. They must have been going through the roof. Whoever passed the information to vindicate Demonic from the State Department, they were so mad, as Traficant would say, they weren't investigating who was framing Traficant, or framing Demonic. They were investigating who gave Traficant that information. That was the investigation. These people need to be arrested. 300 bankers, 300 people, and if I get my money for my commercials this time and the Boehner thing, I'm putting on there. We need to arrest everyone at the Fed, Goldman Sachs, and the media. The media is guilty of corruption of minors, treason, and subversion. We need to start calling for the arrest. The arrest of these people running our media and running our government. Okay, so that's why and you'll see some of that in this last 9-minute video that Jim Rizzoli again kindly put together. I'm going to divert on, I don't have too long to go, but I'm going to divert on to Willis here because I got to give a tribute to Willis. And some of these things are just things that I want to tell you because I can only tell you from my personal experience. First of all, I knew about Willis, and I learned about framing in the spotlight. I met him in 1988 at that populist convention, and I spoke on vote fraud. He had me speaking on vote fraud, computer vote fraud, and I got done, and I was not a major speaker. I was in the middle of the speakers. Bo Greitz was there, as I say, and other big names. So I walked back, and Willis comes up to me like he is on my level, my friend. He says, Jim, really good speech. We got to work together. And it's totally unpretentious. He didn't make you feel like he was up here and he was down here. And he made me feel like I was his equal, which I knew I wasn't. But that was my first encounter. Then 2000 vote fraud convention, he calls me up and says, we want to help. He sends $2,000. And then he was amazed we only got 100 people from around the country right before the 2000 election. But the internet was cutting in. It's hard to get more than 150, 200 people anywhere now because people think I can watch it on they can't watch it on the internet later. So Willis called me up and he said, I can't believe it. But then at the end of the thing, he calls me up and he says, did you guys break even? I said, honestly, we're $3,000. And he sends me a check for $3,000. I mentioned that and was glad to compliment him here on July 19th last year at the Traficant thing. But I don't know I'd still probably be pulling out of debt on that one if he hadn't helped us. So this was Willis Carto, always doing anything he could to help anything that he could really. It hasn't been said yet, I don't think, he ran the only paper in America that was ever shut down by judge's order. In the First Amendment, and the judge shuts down a paper by judicial order. In 1996, my brother John, for 6 months at the end of the campaign, was Pat Buchanan's press secretary, because the main press secretary had to go home because his wife had a miscarriage. And he called me up one night, he found this out from somebody, and he talked to me on the phone for about an hour and said, please tell Buchanan this. I could tell he really cared about the country. He wasn't in it for something else. He was just like a normal guy, and I passed the message on to John and a memo to Pat, but Pat did end up endorsing Dole, which was a tremendous mistake, but that's another story. But Willis, if you heard him on that call, you would say, this guy is a normal guy who just wants to help America in the world. He was pleading just like I plead with, just like I would plead with Traficant. You got to do this or you know. So and he's just talking to me. So he's a very decent and normal guy. 2003, I was at the Barnes Review. I think these are just little flashes of Willis's character, even though he has he's like bigger than life in his papers and stuff he put out. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't know. I don't know how many people would even know that the Hollywood version of the Holocaust is false if it wasn't for Willis. So in 2003, Hutton Gibson was there and Edgar Steele was there. By the way, when I saw Edgar speak that year, first time I ever saw him speak.
I was there too, man.
You were there too? We didn't know each other yet. Okay. And Edgar spoke, and I thought, I knew he was thinking of running for governor of Idaho, and I said, boy, if this guy is such a good speaker, he's going to be trouble for them if he runs. And I also worried about him a little because I know the more effective you are. But I saw Edgar, and so after I think Edgar's talk, I walked up Willis. People were going to dinner, and I said, Willis, I still owe you the $3,000 you sent me at the end of the vote fraud convention. It was 3 years later. He said he was looking at the front of the room. I was here, And he said, oh, don't worry, Jim. He said, don't send it because the judge shut down and they'll just take it anyway. They shut down the paper. Anything you send to Liberty Lobby, they'll take. And then he turned to me and he got that little tear in his eye. It didn't cry, but you know you get a tear at the back of your eye, you know, and he said, Jim, it's really been a pleasure working with you. And I didn't work with him that much, but I could tell he was just happy to see anybody that cared about something and kind of had their head kind of on straight. I don't know if mine's really on straight, but he thought it was. But you could just tell what a good guy he was and so forth. So let's see. Then now I made a note here. I don't know what it means. Oh, another thing Willis Carter did. 1984, Reagan's real popular. He put out in the spotlight that Reagan was letting the Jewish lobby intertwine with the United States government so thoroughly it will never be able to be undone, hardly. The Spotlight went from 300,000 subscribers to 100,000 subscribers in that next year. Now that took courage, but he did tell the truth. He had to tell the truth. That shows the character of the man. He had to come out and say it because nobody else was saying it. But people want a hero, and they wanted Reagan to be their hero, so they canceled. And that's why they kept Traficant from us. We all need heroes. So now we're trying to make a hero of Trump, maybe. But when you got a real hero like Traficant, that's why the media deserves to be put in jail for treason and subversion, for blocking our true leaders and putting pukes like Biden and Bush and Hillary in front of us. And yeah, I want to say Mike Piper. I want to tribute to him. He's probably the best nonfiction writer for politics for my generation. And we also, not only did we lose Piper and Traficant and Willis Carto, we also lost Father Gruner, who Paul and Tara Tepetno. He was a tremendous force, and like Willis, he got out information that no one else did and was always under persecution. So we lost him. Okay, the accident. I'm kind of winding to a close here. The accident. Okay, helicopters were hovering over during the accident. A good friend of his went to the scene, drove right to the scene. They tried to keep him out. This guy who had been a lifelong friend of Jim said, you have to put me in jail. Has the family been notified? He said there was 2 helicopters hovering over, and he watched, after they took Traficant away, he watched, are they going to go towards Youngstown and the television stations and where the police are? No, they went the other direction where nothing was. Now, it doesn't prove anything, but it raises a question. Who are these helicopters? Later that night, next morning, there's a show that Leo told me about, Leo Glazer, and the guy's name is Mike Travisano. He's been on the radio for 25 years at the biggest station up there. He did a show the next day. He said the next day, I believe Traficant was murdered, and he had a caller who said that helicopters came back a few hours after they took Traficant away, and they were hovering above, and one of them went. Could that be somebody coming back to check that they didn't leave anything that might be found? Yeah. I don't know, but I'm just saying, it raises a question here. And then the next day, Mike Travisano was called probably, and he apologized. Oh, I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions yesterday. So, you know, he probably was really arm-twisted to pull back what his gut reaction was and how big of a... And then, like Pete said, no investigation. The guy that has more that has more enemies than anybody in the United States. No criminal investigation. The guy that was there won't talk. Sorry, Andrew Thompson, I don't know who you are, but you need to at least give one interview on what happened. When his friend drove up, he said that Thompson said to him, I guess you're wrapped up in this too now. Well, people are funny if maybe he is traumatized because Traficant, but that's an odd comment. I'm sorry. Secondly, if you ever heard the 911 call that Andrew Thompson did, here's how it sounded. This is how this call sounded. Now, again, he could have been traumatized. It said, it'd be like if I said, we're at the Capitol skyline. There's been a fender bender here. Could you send a squad car as soon as you can? That was how he sounded. Jim Traficant has been injured on his farm.
Very calm.
Now, yeah, very, very almost sedated. Now, maybe he was just traumatized. I don't want to slander the guy, but sorry, we need more than just...
Maybe he was reporting in.
Reporting in. So anyway, now we have the barn's about 300 feet. Pete described it a little bit. It's not just a little barn. Let's see. That's WTAM, by the way, where Mike Travisano is. Let's see. Friend of his who I met a few months later, Pete and I were trying to do what we could to get information. He said to me at the end of a lunch at Kings Island, he said, if you keep pushing on this, you'll end up dead. Now, I'm not worried about that. They're not worried about me. They're worried about Traficant. But Pete and I just would like to know where to look, you know. But the point is, I'm not saying I believe that I would end up dead or anybody else would, because they were afraid of Traficant, not of me or anybody else. But that shows you the fear that's in his Youngstown circle. They're afraid.
tell of how he was burning rubber there after he showed us the barn, right?
That was another guy, but he brought us to the barn, and there was a police car at another farm, and he couldn't get out of there fast enough. Okay, good to see you guys.
He didn't even tell us how to leave there. He just stormed out of there.
Okay, final thing on the accident. He went to the hospital that night. Took him straight to the hospital. This Tuesday, September 23rd. And his cousin was a priest, Father Kish, also Romanian, shortened to Kish, okay? I called Tish the next day, and then I called to Father Kish. And I said, what did you, he said, I gave him last rites. I went over as soon as I heard. And he said, you know, now this is an unsolicited comment from an eyewitness. He said, you know, he looked so strong, I was sure he was going to pull through. Just put that in the back of your head. Okay, now, Tish, though, was being worked on by these doctors, and she said, and I became friends with Tish, and even though she was not a political analyst, she stuck with Jim, and she was going to be the name on Freedom Palooza. So I'm not saying anything bad about her, but they had her convinced. I talked to her the night after or so, and she said, my husband's gone. My husband's not here anymore. Now, this is what they're telling. This is what they tell them in hospitals now, because they want to bring, just as like standard procedures, because they want the organs. So I said, was his heart beating? She said, yeah. I said, is he got brain activity? She said, yeah. I said, well, then he's still there, you know. So anyway, they pulled the plug at 2 o'clock on Friday because they said he'd never survive. So he survived. And he survived another, then he took him to hospice. And now at hospice, this is not a conspiracy. At hospice, they kill people. When you get there, and if you think you're in any way bad, they up the morphine to quit breathing. So Jim got there on Friday, 4 o'clock p.m. He was dead by 11:30 a.m. They probably just upped the morphine on him, I guess, because his heart was strong. The coroner said, no heart attack, no bruises, no crushed bones. 3,000-pound tractor fell over him. It just had to be just perfect. And it asphyxiated him. So when you're asphyxiated, don't you die on the spot? And you live 4 days off. Again, I'm not a doctor. Inquiring minds want to know. Okay, one last thing about Traficant. Traficant was raised Catholic, and this may not mean anything to others, but at Fatima, Our Lady said that anyone who dies wearing the brown scapular will not suffer eternal fire. And Tish, at my request, even though she thought it was not hot on it, she put the brown scapular on Traficant. He did die with the brown scapular on. And that to me is important, and I just thought I would pass that along. Okay, I'm going to say one other thing, then I'm going to come to a close here. Traficant was always against abortion, and you'll see if you look on the Donahue, he says, I don't like abortion, but the rest of his answer was a little fuzzy. But a Father Putka at Dayton University would have him come every year to speak in Ohio, Dayton, Ohio. And in 1990 or so, he said, Jim, you got to quit voting for that abortion funding stuff, even though there's a lot of other stuff in there. Traficant told me this. He said, I said, Father, you're trying to call me back to my roots. And Putka said, yes, I am. So Traficant then became pro-life. He was endorsed by Right to Life in his last campaign in 2010. But he did that and other things. And you know, by 1999, he wasn't in either conference. It was the Democrats, the Republicans, and Traficant. They didn't, neither one of them, which is like a great badge of honor. Okay, so getting serious here towards the end a little bit. We have these great figures in literature and in history, Beowulf, Charlemagne, and these people, some of them are fictionalized, or some of them their life is a little bit fictionalized. But they are like these leaders that pop up. And we met one of these leaders. His name was Jim Traficant. He didn't have his Homer or his Thucydides, who was the Greek who wrote the history for the Peloponnesian War. He didn't have one of those during his life, but maybe he'll have one. Mike Piper did the Target Traficant. That wasn't exactly what I'm talking about, but it was a great thing to clear his name. But that was what Jim was. He really was a figure of that kind, and he couldn't help it, and none of us can become that. When I looked at the July 19th kickoff, I thought, boy, I think Willis gave me a compliment. I thought I did a good job. Then I looked at the tape to come up here to make some of these notes, and I was so disappointed. When you're comparing yourself to somebody like Traficant, you say, boy, I don't even want to watch myself. You just can't compare. And he couldn't help it. It's what Dan Fogelberg put in the Run for the Roses, you know, that song about the Triple Crown winners. It's called Run for the Roses. But one of the lines in there about how does someone become a Triple Crown winner? One of the lines in there is, it's breeding, and it's training, and it's something unknown. Well, the main thing for guys like Traficant, or singers like Celine Dion, or whatever, is that it's something unknown. And I do think Traficant was the greatest speaker in range of anyone I've seen. Second, I would put Louis Farrakhan, and I don't agree with Farrakhan or anything, but if you've ever seen him on TV, Farrakhan was almost as good as Traficant. But nobody else is really in second place. John Kennedy could really inspire you, but Kennedy didn't have the range of ability, I don't think, or at least he never showed it, of Traficant. And as I say, Traficant was a reluctant hero. He didn't plan to get into trouble with the Jewish lobby with Germanic. He just wanted to help a person who needed some help. The main issue in Traficant's life is he fought the synagogue of Satan. He fought the evil people of his time, which is AIPAC and the organized Jewish lobby. That's what he did. And he didn't set out as a sheriff to do that. He just wouldn't back down from a fight. I would say that we want to keep him, we need to keep Jim alive as a symbol, like the other side might keep Martin Luther King alive on. But the issue with Jim is righteous defiance of tyranny. That's what Jim Traficant was. Fighting for the truth and righteous defiance of tyranny. Now, we have Team Traficant. We may use that along with networkamerica.org. That's another speech. We got a thing set up thanks to a homeschool mother named Nikki Nelson, Arizona. I've never met her, where we could have 600,000 people come into this network. And we organized by county, and we could challenge the Democrat and Republican Party and found the Eagles Party. If we could just get enough people in there, they talk online, meet in their county. I won't go into it, but I think we may call it Team Traficant, because that's all we need to say to attract the kind of people we want to attract. We don't want to attract neocons, get 500,000 people that have the same problem again. Traficant will make all the people who don't have their head on straight or brainwashed are just disgraceful. They'll make, the name travel will make them run the other way. Okay. Okay, so finally I want to end with three quick things, one of which is a country song that I think applies to Traficant. It's done by Hal Ketchum. You still see it on YouTube. I watched it last night. It's got a tune, but it's almost kind of like white rapping. But I'm going to read you two of the verses, then the refrain that applies to Traficant, I think. So this is the first thing, just so you get a feel for it. Heard you was in trouble and hurting awful bad, facing the biggest challenges that you have ever had. For peace and truth and justice we've struggled every day, speeding to our rescue faster than a train. Another verse, because we have people from the middle of Europe here. He mentions Budapest here, which is in Hungary, but he says, Metropolis the song's the Superman. Metropolis is calling, and London needs your help. Paris, France, and Budapest can't do it for themselves. Forgive the imposition. Now I know you've got it rough. This old world still needs you, so boy, hang in there tough. May I speak for everyone when I say, and this is the part that I think applies to Traficant. Hang in there, Superman. You always came out fighting at the bell. Hang in there, Superman. 1 billion grown-up children wish you well. Hang in there, Superman. You always came out fighting at the bell. Hang in there, Superman. 1 billion grown-up children wish you well. Maybe we can, with YouTube and that, make Traficant well enough known that there will be 1 billion people soon wishing him well as our symbol. And, and I say this to the ADL, the Jewish lobby, Jewish Congress, AIPAC. If humanity finds out what you did to Traficant, putting him in prison, there's going to be something less than 1 billion people wishing you well. Now, final thing, I mentioned it before, I'm a big fan of the Lord of the Rings because the hobbits are the 3.5-foot tall Scottish-Irish people, and they got helpers, and there's wizards and all this stuff. But it's a story of our time. Tolkien wrote the story for our time. And the hobbits faced overwhelming odds, looked like they were going to lose for sure. And then at the end, some people help them, little divine providence, and they had to keep going through overwhelming odds. So Willis was a little more optimistic than I was. I had said how the other side still controls the levers of power, but he says, yeah, but they're losing power everywhere. But I think we're going to win for sure, but it may get pretty rough between now and then. So what I like to say at the end of some of my talks is, no matter how bad it gets, we are the hobbits, and the hobbits must keep moving. Finally, if we keep working, then I believe that this is what will happen. We were talking to Father Gruner up there in Canada 10 years ago, and people were saying, boy, this thing's going in the wrong direction. Father Gruner said, if we work, my imitation, if we work as hard as we can and pray as hard as we can, then God will do the rest. And I believe that, and I hope you will believe that too.
All I can say is we have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, well, we're the ones that have to continue their legacy. It's no mystery what we need to do. Jim made it very clear. Willis made it very clear. We know what the problem is. We know what the enemy is. We don't know what's going to happen, but we do know, as Jim Rizzoli said, we can't go down on our knees. If we're going to go down, we have to go down on our feet and speak the truth as we know it. I want to thank all of you for coming here, and I want to thank all the speakers for taking the time to travel over here and give Jim Traficant his due and share with us their own experiences with Traficant. And I just wish that we all go away remembering all Traficant did for this country, and tell ourselves that if we could do 1/10 of what he did, we will have done a lot. Thank you all very much.